Sailing begins with becoming Luffy. So everyone, I'm leaving. Be careful on the road, Luffy. Don't you really need to change to a bigger ship? You must become a pirate. Stupid. What kind of pirates? Do you want Luffy to be a disgrace to the village and a disgrace to the village? Ha ha ha, I'll wait for you to come back, Luffy-kun. Hey, big fish, come out. It was already some distance away from the village's harbor, and the young man in the straw hat, who had been sitting cross-legged in the middle of the small fishing boat and rowing his oars, put down the oars in his hand, stood up and stretched, and then put his hands to his mouth and gathered into a trumpet and shouted. As the boy's voice fell, the originally calm sea suddenly rippled, and then the ripples spread out and set off a large wave. With a bang, a huge figure appeared in front of the small fishing boat and the straw hat boy. Crocodile-like shape, but the part that surfaced alone was already more than 5 meters, and the bloody mouth on the hideous skull was open, and inside was a sharp fangs that shimmered with cold light. This is the king of the sea. At this time, the figure of the straw hat boy was reflected in the terrifying vertical pupils. Looking at the young man in front of him wearing a red open-chested shoulder, blue half-legged pants, and a straw hat with a red stripe above the brim, the king of the sea slowly swam in front of the young man, and then lowered his head. It's been 17 years since he was reborn, and Luffy, who finally went to sea today, hasn't wasted so many years. At least the king of the offshore in front of him was tamed by Luffy 2 years ago with the domineering color of the overlord. Picking up the rope that had been prepared long ago from the boat, Luffy put a knot around the neck of the king of the offshore sea, and said, "Take me to the nearest island near Windmill Village." He patted the king of the near sea on the head, and when the other man whimpered twice and got into the sea and began to swim, Luffy sat down again. Enjoying the sea breeze that is constantly blowing in his face as he moves forward at top speed, Luffy can't help but think about the journey that is about to begin. Although he became Luffy, Luffy still didn't have a strategy about navigation. After all, he was busy exercising himself every day, including domineering, fruit and the most basic physical exercise, so that there was not much time left every day, and he had to help take care of Magino's bar. After all, it was not Luffy who had no face and no skin in the original book, and he couldn't eat and drink in vain, so he didn't have extra energy to learn complicated nautical knowledge. In this case, it's better to follow the line of the original book, but with my own strength now, there are not so many nonsensical actions forcibly arranged for the sake of being funny in the original book, which should save a lot of time. The current Luffy, not to mention anything else, is already over 1.8 meters tall just because of long-term exercise and sufficient food, and his figure is not as thin as in the original book, like a monkey, and the angular muscles can be seen through the open clothes, although they are not explosively prominent, but they are full of streamlined beauty, and there is no scar under the left eye in the original book. That's of course, it's not the original tendon. How can you still do that kind of meaningless thing? The scar is not drawn on your own. In addition to the difference in appearance, Luffy's current strength, at least above the strength shown by Luffy before the original Tokushima, is not that he can't be stronger, but that he lacks a real battle with the strong. At least the improvement of domineering is closely related to the battle. For the development of the fruit, Luffy also has some different directions. In the original book, Luffy's powerful moves before the 4th gear all need to be carried out by stretching the body. This is because the characteristics of rubber are like this, which is also the main change of Luffy today, that is, to achieve the maximum rebound power with the smallest deformation. Unless you need to stretch long on certain occasions, you will stretch your body with each attack, and even if you are fast, you will always be caught by your opponent when you are evenly matched. As for developing in the conceptual direction like the original Tyrant Bear, Luffy said that at least for now, he can't do it at all, and can only say that maybe this is the limitation of the superhuman devil fruit. Bidding farewell to the king of the offshore who sent him over in the small fishing boat that eventually broke up due to the extreme speed of sailing, Luffy finally set foot on land again after 2 days of sailing. As soon as he stepped on this island, Luffy began to see and hear domineering, and then, the whole picture of this small island was presented in Luffy's mind in black and white. This kind of domineering sight and hearing similar to the white eyes in the Hokage seems to be different from the hearing and perception mentioned in the original book, and Luffy attributes it to the changes brought about by rebirth. It seems that it was just the right time. There was a ship flying the pirate flag on the opposite side of the island, and there were people moving in a warehouse-like place on the island. However, what Luffy didn't expect the most was that he would actually meet the person he was going to find here. Looks like it hasn't gotten rid of it. Luffy chuckled twice before heading towards the other side of the island. 5 years ago, Little Luffy. Grandpa is back to see you. Garp, who learned from the villagers that Luffy was here, shouted inside at the door of the banquet bar. Hear me, stupid old man. The bar door opened, and 12-year-old Luffy walked out of it with a barrel about the same height as himself. Looking at Garp, who was standing at the door and about to push the door in, Luffy didn't have the joy of reuniting after a long absence. Let's Gene, stupid old man. I'm going to move this to the warehouse. Seeing that the other party's burly body blocked the door, Luffy said angrily. Oh, okay. Garp scratched his gray-haired head and subconsciously turned sideways to get out of the way. Before Luffy could cross the door, the other party slammed a punch into Luffy's head. Stupid Luffy, who do you call stupid old man? Do you want to call Grandpa no? Just as the fist was about to hit Luffy's head, Luffy quickly moved to the side. Huh? Garp was taken aback, but instead of withdrawing his hand, he turned slightly. Bang! Luffy's head instantly rose into a big bag. It's painful, stinky old man. Luffy yelled at Garp, dissatisfied, although he had awakened to see and hear, but his body couldn't keep up and he could only be beaten. Call Grandpa, stinky boy. Garp roared dissatisfiedly, but you actually woke up to see and hear the domineering. It seems that the old man threw you in the deep mountains and old forests to train very effectively, so that you can become an excellent sailor. Then I saw a smug smile on his face, his left hand hugged his chest, and his right hand rubbed his chin and said, Die, stinky old man, I won't be in the Navy. If I get a bounty by then, you can pray that I just become a pirate instead of joining the Revolutionary Army. Luffy walked towards the warehouse next to him without looking back. Hey, stinky boy, what stupid things are you talking about, and how do you know about the Revolutionary Army? Could it be that your old son came to look for you, right? Father, I still have a father, said Luffy, who had just pushed the warehouse door open and turned back to Garp. Although he was reborn as Luffy and knew a little about his cheap father Dorag, Garp didn't know that he was reborn, and he had only seen that man once when he was born, and he never saw him again. Ah, this, that, you're still young, I'll talk about this when you're older, haha. Ha ha ha. Seeing that Luffy was interested in his father, whom he had never met, Garp thought. Garp, who knew that it wasn't Dorag's reason, began to fight haha. HMPH, forget it. As for why you don't become a navy, when there are no draconians in this world, come and tell me about the justice of your navy. Luffy snorted lightly, and then continued. Moreover, I heard that 3 years ago, a group of fishman pirates came to the East China Sea and ruled a large part of the island villages in the East China Sea, and the villagers of these ruled villages are better off than dead, and as the hometown of you, a naval hero, but there is no navy to inform you about this. You don't want to think about why? When I heard about this, I wanted to tell you the next time you came. Who knew that you would not come back until 3 years later? Even when I wanted to contact you, I found that you didn't even give me a contact information, and even if I couldn't contact you, how could someone from the Navy branch contact you for such a long time? But now that you appear in front of me, you don't know about it at all? A series of questions spat out from the mouth of 12-year-old Luffy, and Garp's face became darker and darker, and the blue veins on his forehead burst out, apparently on the verge of rage. These damn bastards are actually under my nose. Without doubting what Luffy said, the amazing momentum came out of Garp's body, not because of the domineering spirit of the Overlord, but because of the strong breath that came out of the battle, fighting bravely again and again. Even if this breath deliberately avoided Luffy, it also made Luffy feel breathless. I won't be a navy. The constraints of rules and regulations and the existence of the Draconians make me feel bad about the world government and the navy, but I will solve the grievances I see in my own way. Even if I become a pirate and be rewarded. And when this sentence is finished, Luffy seems to have untied some kind of knot, which is the uneasiness that he has always felt as a traverser and an arrogance that seems to be outside the world and incompatible with this world. The astonishing momentum erupted, forming an invisible wave of chi that swept away, and the surrounding leaves rattled as if they were swept by a strong wind, and the entire world seemed to have lost its color at this moment, and the reborn Luffy finally found and determined his future path at this moment, and the power called the Overlord color domineering that originally existed in the body finally awakened. Although it was the first time to awaken the Overlord color domineering, Luffy controlled this momentum as if instinctively, allowing it to only explode between himself and Garp, and did not deter other people in the tavern or nearby, which may be the effect of Luffy's extremely high spiritual attributes in his 2 lives. Luffy, you kid. Garp looked at his grandson in front of him in a daze. Luffy, who was only 12 years old and was still a little kid, seemed to have grown up suddenly at this time, and there was a hint of sadness in addition to relief. He hadn't seen him for 3 years, but it gave Garp a feeling that things were wrong. Moreover, there is nothing wrong with the momentum just now that it is overlord-colored domineering. Luffy has awakened this overlord-colored domineering, and then let him go to the Navy. Those rules and regulations may become a constraint for him to embark on the road of the strong in the future. This time, Garp kind of let go of the idea of forcibly letting Luffy be a Navy. I'm going with you this time to clear the pirates, Grandpa. With that, Luffy picked up the barrel that had just been placed on the ground to open the door, ignored Garp, and walked towards the warehouse. Letting go of the arrogance of being a traverser, Luffy shouted the word Grandpa out of his mouth for the first time. It's the first time you've called Grandpa when you're 12 years old. You're really a bad grandson, Luffy. It seems that this vacation has to end early, and after this group of pirates is exterminated, I have to go back to the Navy headquarters as soon as possible to talk to the warring states about the current problems in the Navy, as well as the damn garbage of the Draconians. Thinking like this, Garp finally just clenched his fist and gathered his momentum. I don't know what Luffy's future path will be, but it must be very exciting, right? But since you can't become a Navy, if you become a pirate by then, don't blame the old man's men for being ruthless, Luffy kid. Looking at the blue sky, Garp's originally clear eyes were a little misty at this time, and he couldn't help muttering to himself, and his face, which was already slightly old, was no longer his usual indecency. This is what you call the justice of the Navy. Luffy, who followed Garp to Cocoa West Village, looked at the Navy and the fishman who were trading treasures, and asked Garp without looking back. Because it was a vacation, Garp didn't bring a warship, and the place where the two of them were standing now was still some distance away from the fishmen and the Navy who were trading. Although he said that arbitrarily just when he saw a few scum of the Navy, who made Luffy only 12 years old at this time, and saying such things is also a child's vision problem in Garp's opinion. Although it is true that there are a few navies with such problems, at least the vast majority of navies still abide by the heart of justice, and on the contrary, the vast majority of pirates are all evil, burning, looting and doing all kinds of evil. Even so, do you want to become a pirate? Instead of making an immediate move, Garp asked Luffy instead. It's not up to me whether I want to be a pirate or not. I won't hang the pirate flag until I'm rewarded, but if I encounter this kind of thing in the future, I won't have any scruples about the other party being a navy or world government or something. Since you have said so, as a grandfather, I can't stop my grandson's dream, but since you are not in the Navy, then I originally wanted to teach you the 6 naval styles and I can't teach them privately. After a pause, Garp continued. That's the end of the small talk. I'll go back to the Navy headquarters after the matter is settled here, and this time I will leave my personal phone bug number, so that you can contact me in the future. After saying that, Garp no longer hidden, and walked towards the Navy and the fishman step by step, and when the other party finally noticed that someone appeared, Garp's forehead was already bursting with green tendons, and he was on the verge of rage. How? How come? Hero. Card. Garp, Colonel Mouse, who had just taken over the treasure chest full of treasures, suddenly slid cold sweat down his forehead after seeing the comber, and his body began to tremble uncontrollably. Just pirates, they also want to establish a paradise country here? Pirate Evil Dragon, when Jinping bailed you out on the condition that he joined the 7 Martial Seas, he didn't let you wait here to do evil. Sure enough, pirates are pirates? As he spoke, Garp flashed, and appeared between the pirates and the Navy, and his domineering fist continued to enlarge between the angry eyes of the fishman dragon, and before he had time to react, he had already flown out with severe pain, and before he could hit the obstacle, the dragon had already fainted with white eyes. With the roar of the dragon crashing into the building, Cap's feet connected the dots, and the remaining fishman pirates who were still in the panic and shock of the boss being knocked away knocked to the ground one by one. As for you, Colonel Mouse, as a Navy, instead of insisting on justice and protecting civilians, you will join the pirates and trap civilians in dire straits. Follow me back to the Navy headquarters to go to the military court, and then stay in prison for the rest of your life. Ignoring Garp's reprimand, and keeping in mind Garp's deliberately slowed shaving skills, Luffy walked towards the short-haired orange girl he saw hiding on the side. The evil dragon gang has been solved, aren't you going to inform the other villagers? Looking at the girl in front of him who was covering her mouth and crying, Luffy walked up to the front and gently patted the other party's slightly trembling shoulder and said, "Woo, why are they only here now? Why are they in the same league as the Navy with the evil dragon? Shouldn't the Navy protect civilians?" Looking at the young man who appeared in front of her, she didn't care how the other party found out. The girl grabbed the young man's collar, and her crying voice was a little sharp. "Cry, cry, Just cry, it's all over, I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. Not caring if the girl's mud-covered clothes and little hands would stain him, Luffy reached out and hugged the other party in his arms, put his right hand on the back of the girl's head, and gently patted the other party's still trembling back with his left hand. Why? Woo, if you come earlier, Burmel. Burmel won't die. Woo. The girl who was held in Luffy's arms finally lost control of her emotions and began to cry. Garp has already finished dealing with the dragons, and is now reprimanding the Navy soldiers who are forced to threaten, and it is estimated that it will take a while to come over. The girl who was held in Luffy's arms had stopped crying, but her slightly trembling shoulders showed that the other party had not completely calmed down. Breaking free from Luffy's arms, the girl let go of the hand that grabbed Luffy's neckline. Is that old man the Navy hero Garp? Yes, he is Garp, I am his grandson. My name is Mancha D. Luffy. You can call me Luffy, so, what about your name? Although Luffy knew who the other party was the moment he sensed it, he still had to ask. Nami, my name is Nami. I just heard you say in the back that you don't want to be in the Navy, that's why, obviously your grandfather is that Navy hero. Nami, who had already recovered her emotions, did not immediately inform the villagers of what happened here, but asked about the conversation between Luffy and Garp that she had just heard. Well, how to put it, there are still many reasons, but the main thing is that I will go to sea to travel around the world in the future, and the Navy will not have so much free time for me to fulfill my dreams. Luffy thought for a moment before speaking. Around the world? Nami's eyes lit up slightly, and it was obvious that she was also quite longing for Luffy's dream. Of course, after all, Nami's dream in the original book is to travel around the world and draw a map of her own world. Yes, traveling around the world. How about going to sea with me in the future? Luffy asked expectantly. Do you want to go to sea and be a pirate? That kind of thing. How could I be a pirate? That's of course, after all, the home was destroyed by the pirates, and the adoptive mother was brutally killed by the pirates, so there is a natural sense of rejection for the pirates. It's not wrong to say that pirates are probably not wrong, after all, there should be a lot of encounters with this kind of navy in the future, and I won't show mercy when the time comes. Although he thinks that he should belong to the adventurer, the celestial dragons of the world government, the 5 old stars, these don't care about this, in their eyes, as long as they disobey them, they are rebels. This. If so, as long as you don't be that kind of bastard who burns and loots, then I'll grant your invitation. After listening to Luffy's words and understanding the reason why Luffy said that she might become a pirate, Nami breathed a sigh of relief. After all, he is the grandson of the hero Garp, and he just heard their conversation, and even Garp didn't object to Luffy's dream of becoming a pirate when he went to sea, and it was impossible for Luffy to become the kind of villain who did evil, and besides, he also had a dream of drawing his own world map, so it shouldn't be wrong to follow him. Did you say yes? That's great. I thought that the other party would not agree at this time, thinking that I would invite her again when I went to sea in the future, but I didn't expect to agree now, and Luffy was also a little surprised for a while. Well, but if you become a pirate like a dragon, I won't hesitate to disembark. Nami looked at the boy in front of her, who was a head taller than herself, and said, of course, as long as you really just want to travel around the world, then I will also study sailing knowledge seriously, and then I will set off with you as your navigator. Don't worry, even if I wanted to be like that, I wouldn't have had such a chance, and don't forget, my grandfather was a naval hero. Luffy looked at Nami's serious face and said equally seriously, well, let's say okay. I'll go to sea when I'm 17 years old, that is, 5 years later, and I'll come here to find you at that time. Thinking of the agreement between the two at that time, Luffy's steps couldn't help but speed up a little. After so many years, I don't know if she still remembers herself. Soon, Luffy arrives at the only building on the island called Gothic, a rudimentary warehouse made of stone. Along the way, he relied on his domineering appearance to avoid the pirates who occupied the island, and although it was easy for Luffy to solve, at least it was not too late to do it after finding Nami. At this time, at the door of the warehouse, a slender figure was sneakily looking around. Her bright long orange hair fell to her waist, and her cat-like body was neatly unlocked. Opened the door lock of the warehouse after making sure that there was no one around. She's not going to be a pirate stealer for the past 5 years, is she? But I haven't heard anything about the little thief cat. Looking at the other party's skillful appearance, Luffy couldn't help but muttered to himself. Without waiting for the other party to enter, Luffy directly showed his figure. Stealing is not a good act. The voice that suddenly appeared behind her made Nami, who was about to enter the warehouse, freeze in place for a moment, and then turn her head slowly. The familiar straw hat, the familiar face, but compared to the small figure 5 years ago, it can now be described as burly, and the delicate and resolute face under the straw hat is with a gentle smile at this time. In an instant, Nami's heart, which was beating wildly because of being discovered, magically calmed down. Luffy. Looking at the other party's surprise from the initial horror to seeing his appearance clearly, Luffy was also a little stunned for a while. It's no longer the immature little girl 5 years ago. At this time Nami has waist-length orange hair, bright eyes and bright teeth, and her delicate face shows her youth and beauty, with the large breasts, and shrinks sharply down to the waist. Under the backdrop of a slim long-sleeved shirt with blue stripes, it looks quite attractive, and the blue jeans on the lower body wrap the straight and slender legs, which are also wrapped, as well as the straight and round buttocks, simple clothes matching, but showing the amazing charm of the girl. Looking at Nami, who was similar to the image in the original book 2 years later, Luffy was in a trance for a while, not the kind of revealing clothes in the original book, but it made Luffy have a sense of amazement, as a reborn Luffy, but not the kind of stupid person who didn't know what a woman was in the original book. Calming down, Luffy looked away slightly. I didn't expect to meet you just out to sea, and I thought I'd wait until I got the boat to find you. Nami. Smiling slightly, Luffy said to the girl in front of him who was also stunned. It's really you, Luffy. Looking at Luffy who was smiling slightly, hearing Luffy's answer, Nami finally came back to her senses, and then, in Luffy's stunned eyes, she threw herself into Luffy's arms and hugged Luffy. Obviously, the two have only met for the second time, but for some reason, they don't feel strange at all. With the warm nephrite in his arms, Luffy didn't know where to put his hand for a while, so he had to gently pat Nami on the back. Nami, who hugged Luffy in excitement for a while, was not embarrassed, and after feeling the patting on the back, she let go of Luffy, and her bright eyes fell on Luffy's face again. I haven't seen you for 5 years, and it makes people feel more secure, but when we first met, we were just a thin child. Haven't you changed a lot? The little girl has become the slim beauty she is now. I'm fascinated. I didn't expect you to be quite good at talking. Hearing Luffy's praise, Nami's heart was happy for no reason, and her mood suddenly became happy. Why are you here? Are you still stealing pirate treasure for 5 years? Luffy is still quite curious about Nami's appearance here. Even if it is the original book, it should have been in Orangetown, which Bucky occupied. Hearing Luffy's question, Nami first stuck out her tongue, and then said, of course I know that you are going to sea this year, so I want to go back to my old bank to prepare some funds. Shook his head funny, although you hide it very well, ordinary people really can't find it, but this is also because this is only the East China Sea. There are no decent powerhouses, and it will be different when you reach the Great Route, but you don't need to do this then, you just need to be my navigator, and I will protect you. Although having said that, Luffy has also considered the strength of the crew in the future, so he plans to explain the domineering cultivation method to the people who join later before entering the Great Voyage. How reliable, then my safety will be left to you, Captain. Speaking of which, you're going with me now, so before you enter the Great Voyage, do you want to go back to Cocoa West Village? Suppressing the surprise of the reunion, Luffy looked at Nami, who was searching for the treasure in the warehouse, and suddenly asked. The main reason is that Nami's posture of looting treasures at this time is really tempting, and the hips that appear to be particularly upright because of the bending over make Luffy not know where to put his eyes for a while, and can only divert attention by talking. No need, I've already greeted Nuo Kagao and Ken before I set off, and I won't look back until I'm done traveling around the world and drawing a map of the world, but as my captain, you don't want to be killed halfway. My life is on you. Is that so? Luffy nodded, just about to continue saying something, and then, as if sensing something, turned his head to look into the distance, and said, someone is coming. Huh, how did you find out? Nami put the last treasure in the cloth bag, and then carried the cloth bag on her back, walked up to Luffy's side, looked around, and did not find the person Luffy was talking about. Well, it's a kind of power called seeing and hearing domineering, which can sense the breath of people outside the field of vision, the number, etc. And when the pirates here are solved, I'll tell you about it, although no one in this East China Sea should be able to hurt you in my hands, but it's different when it comes to the Great Voyage or even the New World, and it's always good to be able to master it. Luffy explained a little, and then set his eyes on the group of people who had already appeared in the field of vision. Didn't say anything to tell Nami to be careful. If even this gang could hurt Nami in his own hands, then Luffy wouldn't have to go to sea, and just do chores in Majino's bar for a lifetime. I could already see the pirates, but Nami wasn't scared. Her beautiful eyes stared at the figure in front of her, and a sense of relief welled up in her heart. Hey, who are you guys? Why did you appear on my island? Don't you know if this is my Iron Rod Yerita's territory? The leader is a woman with a mace in her hand, but the woman's appearance is really indescribable, and the other party doesn't seem to see Nami, who is carrying a cloth bag full of treasures behind Luffy, but just looks at Luffy with an angry face and says loudly. Without waiting for Luffy to answer, the other party turned his head to look at a short, pink-haired boy beside him, shook the mace in his hand on his shoulder, and said, "Hey, Kirby, tell him, who am I, Yerita?" The short boy, who was named, shuddered, held his head habitually with both hands, squatted down, and then stumbled under the gaze of the sneering pirates next to him. "You should." "Yes, of course. The most. In the world, the most." "Who is this short and ugly old woman?" Nami, who poked her head out from behind Luffy, looked at the strange-looking woman and said, "That delicate face and the other party are really the same heaven and the center of the earth." Alas! Whether it was the woman in charge, the short boy who was asked, or the other little minions around him, all of them were shocked after hearing Nami's words, and their jaws stretched and they froze in place. Poof! Luffy, who also heard Nami's words, couldn't hold back his laughter all of a sudden, and without waiting for the other party's reaction, he directly stretched out his right foot, rubber whip, quickly elongated his right leg, swept out, directly across a distance of dozens of meters, and kicked all the people except for the pink-haired short, fat boy who was still squatting. I'm not in the habit of listening to the enemy's nonsense. Although it was only a light kick for Luffy, no one could withstand this kick with these little minions. Alas, whether it was Nami behind Luffy or the pink-haired short, fat boy not far away, they were surprised by Luffy's suddenly stretched non-human-like feet. "It's the power of the devil fruit. I'm a rubber person who eats the rubber fruit, and my body can stretch and deform at will like rubber," Luffy casually explained to the two of them. "Devil fruit? Is that the thing called the secret treasure of the sea?" Nami, who has been learning about navigation and meteorology in the past 5 years in order to follow Luffy out to sea, has also learned some other things, and the devil fruit is one of them. "Well, that's right, there are 3 kinds of devil fruits: animal type, which can transform into various animals after eating it, and have superhuman resilience and strength. Superhuman type, which can have all kinds of incredible superpowers after eating, and the rubber fruit I eat belongs to this category. And the most powerful nature system for ordinary people. Eating can have the ability to cause natural disasters and incarnate the corresponding natural elements. Luffy was a little more popular. I was going to find you a devil fruit, but after eating the devil fruit, you will turn into a landlubber and can't swim, so I want to ask what you mean, Nami." In Luffy's thoughts, it is best to find the yin fruit of the natural system for Nami, so that it has both self-preservation ability and Nami's talent, which should be the most suitable choice, but the natural system is too precious, and there is not much chance of encountering it. After a slight mutter, Nami continued, "I remember that the cheapest devil fruit seems to cost 100 million Bailey, right? 100 million Baileys is just the most garbage fruit. Naturally I won't give you this kind of food, since you don't resist. Then I know in my heart, when I meet the right one, I will pay attention. After all, when it comes to the great voyage, even I can't guarantee that I will notice your safety at the first time, so every bit of strength you have, I can also have enough time to react." Since Nami is not resistant to eating devil fruits, Luffy will also pay more attention to the information about the fruits. There is really no information about the yin fruit, so it is a big deal to try his luck with the golden lion and see if he can get the piao fruit. Otherwise, I won't eat it. It's good to replace such a valuable devil fruit with Bailey. At this time, Nami's eyes turned into the shape of Bailey, and it seemed that she had completely filtered the rest of Luffy's words, leaving only this information about the value of the devil fruit in her mind. "Stupid, take a long-term view. Are you afraid that you won't be able to get Bailey if you have the ability?" Luffy was a little speechless. This girl is really hopeless. She was saved 5 years ago and she doesn't have to think about money, and now she is still as much a money fan as in the original book. Excuse me. The short boy who had been ignored by the two suddenly spoke resignedly. "Leaving you just to see that you don't look like one of them, but your character seems to be a miscellaneous person. Although Luffy has some understanding of the other party through the original book, it is still necessary to make a conclusion about the reality through observation. I'm so sorry, my name is Kirby. I don't know how you two. What do you call it?" Seeing that Luffy and Nami didn't mean to hurt themselves, Kirby finally took a breath, but he still stumbled a little when he spoke. Your weak face really makes people want to bully when they see it, or is my captain reliable, strong and manly? Looking at the other party's cowering appearance, Nami couldn't help but complain. I'm sorry. Didn't refute at all, apologized directly, this guy was simply hopeless. Luffy shook his head, just call me Luffy, she's Nami, and the two of us are preparing to go to sea, but it's you. Why are you here, and what are your plans in the future? I was caught by them 2 years ago when I was fishing, and I didn't kill them because I knew a little bit of navigation, but I just kept doing chores for them. Kirby explained slightly, then scratched his head, looking a little ashamed. Nami looked at the other party in surprise, and then asked speechlessly, didn't you resist, or didn't you find a chance to escape? It's impossible. Resist and you'll be killed. I can't run away, Nami asked embarrassedly, and Kirby stuttered again for a while. Then you're really useless. Although he had learned about Kirby when he watched anime in his previous life, it still made Luffy feel speechless for a while when it came out of his mouth. So what's next for you? Sitting on a small boat, borrowed from Yarida's group of pirates, Luffy asked Kirby, who was also paddling on the bow of the boat, while paddling the oars. I want to become a navy and arrest all pirates like Arita. Hearing Luffy's question, Kirby suddenly became excited, and even the paddling in his hand stopped. Be a navy. But can you really become a navy like this? Nami, who was sitting behind Luffy, was originally shining with her eyes lit up with the treasure she had just looted over and over again. When she heard Kirby's words, she said mercilessly, I'm not going to give up, I want to be like Mr. Luffy. That can protect the existence of others. Kirby, who was questioned by Nami, blushed all of a sudden. Yes, I know, so can you continue paddling? Casually perfunctory, Nami instead cast her beautiful eyes on Luffy who was paddling. Remembering the way Luffy was in front of her before, the wide and straight back made Nami feel extremely relieved, and stroked her slightly messy hair that was blown by the wind, and a smile hooked up from the corner of her mouth. Time passed in a small talk, and before the sun was about to set, the three of them finally arrived at the destination of the trip, the town of Shelds. Re-stepping on land, Luffy took the bag full of treasure handed over by Nami, and the three of them walked towards the island town under the leadership of Kirby. Although he was enslaved by Yarida for 2 years, Kirby still has an impression of this town, and he should have been here before. So, let's exchange the treasure for Bailey first. It's not very convenient to hold so many treasures. There should be a place to change it in this town, right? Yes, Mr. Luffy, although the town of Shelds is not big, there are still special shops for treasure trading. As long as the amount is not particularly large, it can be exchanged. Kirby replied as he led the way ahead. Then it's almost time for us to part. After all, Nami and I will become pirates sooner or later, and the nature of Yarida's enslavement of you is different, and if you get too close to us, it will be extremely detrimental to your naval career in the future. Although according to the original book, the other party will become his grandfather's descendant, but Luffy is not sure whether the plot will follow the original book under his influence. Besides, Luffy doesn't agree with what Kirby did in the Top War in the original book, not to mention that the soldier fleeing the battlefield is a capital crime. When the Navy is chasing the pirates with victory, it is obviously the Navy, but it prevents the Navy from continuing to pursue, and it sounds good to save the wounded, but the thing that saves the wounded needs to be done by soldiers fighting on the front line. What's more, Akainu is still a general, and he doesn't obey the orders of his superiors and doesn't say anything. But he has to prevent his superiors from expanding the results of the battle. Which in Luffy's eyes now, it's like when he is about to slash the enemy, someone suddenly stands up to stop him, and this person is still his companion. Then Luffy will consider whether it is correct for him to regard the other party as a companion. Even if the Akainu in the original book annoys the reader again, but a soldier is a soldier. A thief is a thief. If this anime is called The King of the Navy, maybe the reader's point of view is reversed 180 degrees? Mr. Luffy. After listening to Luffy's words, Kirby didn't know what to say for a while. The other party not only saved himself, but now he is still thinking about his future. Emotionally speaking, he should thank the other party, but rationally told himself that the other party was right to do so. Besides, we're about to do something to the Navy here, and it's for your own good if you don't have anything to do with us. Because after logging in, Luffy, who habitually turned on the domineering perception of what he saw, heard, saw a certain figure tied to the execution ground. It seems that the old man didn't clean up completely at the beginning, and there is still this kind of naval scum? Or did this appear later? Although he should have saved a lot of time, he still met his swordsman here, and I have to say that the inertia of the plot is really big. Navy scum, Luffy, do you mean? Hearing Luffy's words, Nami, who had been silent, suddenly spoke, her eyes full of disgust for the Navy scum that Luffy said. Leave it to me over there, Nami, you go and exchange the treasure you got from Rita for Bailey. Whether it's buying a ship or buying supplies, you need to use Bailey, although the future is destined to be pirates, but we don't go to sea for looting, of course, pirates are counted. Don't you need my help? Although she knew that Luffy was strong, it was not clear how strong she was, and Nami asked with a little worry. Don't worry, the Navy here can't help me, and besides, maybe we'll have one more partner. Although the Navy doesn't pose a threat to herself, Nami is different from the past, and it won't be good if she gets hit by a stray bullet when the time comes, at least until Nami has mastered the domineering power of seeing and hearing. Try not to let her participate in group battles. Although Nami has experienced a lot of battles in the anime, this is reality after all, and it is a question whether the protagonist's aura exists or not, and Luffy doesn't want to gamble with Nami's life. Okay then, I'll wait for you at that restaurant over there after I'm done changing the treasure. Don't make me wait too long. Nami didn't insist, although she was a little worried, but Nami still chose to believe Luffy, which was also decided from the moment she decided to accept Luffy's invitation. Nami glanced at Luffy, then took the bag full of treasure from Luffy's hand and turned to walk in the direction of the trading ground that Kirby was pointing. And what about you? Kirby, I was going to part ways with you here, but since this happened, do you want me to take you to see what the Navy in this town is like? Luffy asked as he turned to the stocky boy who was still stunned and at a loss. Kirby, who was asked by Luffy, was taken aback, and then turned to Luffy with some dancing hands. Mr. Luffy, what are you talking about? Take me to the naval base here? Kirby was just a short, stocky boy with no hands on his back, and he had no idea what Luffy meant by his words, nor what the Navy in this town was like. Looking at Kirby who was still panicked in front of him, Luffy couldn't help but be a little speechless. Such a person, what kind of consideration did Oda have to make him improve like a hanging in the future? Not all navies uphold the heart of justice, and this is one of the reasons why I didn't become a navy. The admiral in this town is one of this part of the despicable scum of the Navy. How about it, do you want to go and see with me? And then reconfirm your determination to become a navy? Luffy asked with some bad taste. He didn't need to act according to the established character in the original book when he started his life again. I'm going to see it, but even if it is I won't give up on becoming a navy. Although he was a little frightened by Luffy's words, Kirby still shouted out his thoughts loudly. Really, then come with me. I hope you can still be so persistent then. Seeing that the other party seemed to be aroused by his words, Luffy changed his opinion of the other party a little, at least not exactly a coward. Glancing at Kirby and motioning for the other party to follow, Luffy walked towards the execution square that he sensed in his domineering appearance. Kirby behind him saw Luffy leaving, and immediately trotted to follow, the slightly short figure stumbling, as if he was going to fall at any moment. By the time Luffy and Kirby arrived at the gate of the execution square, Kirby was already a little out of breath, and when he saw Luffy stop, he hurriedly held his knees with his hands and gasped for breath. Luffy's face was calm. He stretched out his left hand to hold the straw hat on his head, and then his right hand slammed forward, his normal arm stretched like a rubber rope, and his hand was clawed and quickly grabbed towards the edge of the wall in front of him, and then looked back at Kirby, who was still panting. Come and pull me, I'll take you in. This, isn't that okay? Seeing Luffy look like he wanted to force his way in, Kirby cringed back into his old habit again. Seeing Kirby's appearance, Luffy didn't bother to talk nonsense, and directly stretched out his left foot to wrap around Kirby's right hand, and then with his right hand, the two of them flew out under the traction of Luffy's right hand. Ah! Bang! Bang! Two landing sounds sounded. Luffy stood firmly on the execution ground, and Kirby was a little embarrassed. The short and fat figure rolled on the ground twice in a row before completely stopped, and then hurriedly got up from the ground. Hey, who are you two guys? Just as Kirby was just standing up, a slightly weak, but dangerous, voice came. Yes. We're sorry. We didn't mean to break in. The sudden voice made Kirby reflexively bend down and apologize, and then looked up at the source of the voice. You are, pirate hunter, Roronoa Zoro. As soon as he saw the other party's appearance, Kirby made a fuss again, obviously having a certain understanding of the other party's identity. However, the person tied to the cross stake didn't pay much attention to the panicked Kirby, and instead cast those sharp eyes on Luffy who was standing on the side. Your undisguised ferocious eyes are really worthy of the name of that monster. Roronoa Zoro. Luffy had been staring at the figure tied to the cross stake since he landed, and only then did he speak when he saw the other party's sharp eyes staring at him. The familiar green turban and cloth pocket were wrapped around his head and waist respectively, and the white short sleeves could not hide the bulging muscles of the other party, although his hands were tied to the wooden stake, but he could not hide the fierce aura of the other party's body like a beast. "Since you know my name, why don't you get out of here, or are you some kind of enemy of mine who wants to take revenge on me now?" For Luffy, who suddenly flew in from outside the wall. Zoro didn't know each other, but Zoro was secretly vigilant. The somewhat funny short and fat boy didn't say it, but the Straw Hat Boy who had been staring at him since he came in gave Zoro a lot of pressure, and his intuition told him that the other party was very strong. "Don't be nervous. My name is Luffy. I'm not your enemy. I'm here just to meet you, and then it's to deal with the Navy here." Shrugging his shoulders, not caring about the vigilance in the other party's eyes, Luffy said his purpose indifferently. "See me, deal with the Navy. Are you a pirate?" Although Luffy did not show any hostility towards himself, Zoro did not let his guard down because of this. "Yes, meet you, and then confirm if I want to invite you to be my partner. After all, I'm not the original Luffy, but I can't guarantee that that kind of foolish approach can make others follow him into life and death." "Invite me to be your partner? Are you making a mistake? I'm a pirate hunter. Since you're going to deal with the Navy, it should be a pirate, right? Invite me as a pirate hunter. Aren't you afraid that I'll cut off your head in exchange for a bounty?" Hearing Luffy's words, Zoro didn't understand Luffy's thoughts for a while. "Let's not say that I don't have a bounty yet, and besides, I'm still quite confident in my own strength, and you're not my opponent at all." This is not Luffy's boasting. He didn't comprehend domineering, nor did he comprehend cutting iron, and Zoro, who hadn't stepped out of the East China Sea, couldn't even break Luffy's domineering. "Huh, I really dare to say it. I just don't know if I have real skills under my hands." Luffy's understatement made Zoro's forehead wrapped in a turban jump, although he could indeed feel that the other party was not the kind of little minion he had met before, and he could deal with it casually, but this was not a reason why the other party could look down on him, right? "Otherwise, I'll get you out, and then we'll fight, and I'll win. How about you get on my ship?" Luffy said, staring at Zoro's beastly eyes. "Mr. Luffy, don't, although you are also very strong, but the other party is the pirate hunter. You will be killed." Luffy had just finished speaking, and Kirby, who had not yet calmed down from the shock of seeing Zoro, shouted again, completely unaware of the fact that he had infiltrated the execution ground. "It's okay to be arrogant if you don't mention what to do if you lose, but I don't need you to save me. As long as I survive a month, the Navy will naturally let me go." Zoro was not at all interested in Kirby, who was shouting on the sidelines, and his eyes were still firmly fixed on Luffy. Luffy didn't answer Zoro's words for the first time, but set his eyes on the gate of the execution ground. As the gate was pushed open, a group of soldiers dressed in marine uniforms trotted in, and as the last tall figure slowly walked in, Luffy and the three of them were already surrounded. "Who are you two who dared to disobey my orders and make private contact with the prisoner who is about to be executed? Are you with him? That's what you said the Navy will let you go in the end?" Luffy turned his head and asked Zoro with a playful face, ignoring the question from the lead Navy. Cut. Hearing the Navy say that he was a prisoner who was about to be executed, Zoro also understood that he had been tricked by the stupid son from before, so he snorted and turned his head. "Damn, that Navy is not trustworthy. I can't die here, Guina." "Hey, you said you want me to be your partner? I can't die here yet. I have a promise that must be fulfilled, so I can agree to your invitation, but my goal is to become the world's #1 swordsman. If you hinder my ambitions, I won't spare you easily." Thinking of his agreement with Guina, Zoro turned back to Luffy and said loudly, "Are you sure I want you to be my partner?" Luffy looked at Zoro with a slight smile. "I have to say that this guy Manga really gave a good assist." "You guy." Facing Luffy's question, Zoro didn't feel that the other party wanted to reject him, but he always felt a little uncomfortable being led by the other party like this. "Hey, you guys, what am I asking you? Are you going to disobey me?" The Admiral, who was ignored, saw Luffy and the two chatting to themselves, and for a while his anger surged, and he roared loudly at the three of them. "Soldier, shoot all those who disobey my orders." With a wave of his right hand with an axe, Manga ordered the Navy soldiers who surrounded Luffy and the others. No, are you really in the Navy? Why shoot indiscriminately, Mr. Luffy? Think of a way, we're going to be killed." Seeing the surrounding Navy soldiers raise their muskets, Kirby suddenly jumped behind Luffy, dragging Luffy's clothes and shaking them desperately. Up. Colonel, really want to? Do you want to shoot? Asked Manga with a hand holding a musket in the navy that surrounded Luffy and the others, and asked with some hesitation. Do you also want to disobey the orders of me, the person of the highest rank? Said Manga, who was asked by his soldiers. His eyes widened and he glared at the soldiers who were hesitant. In that case, you should also die, and whoever hesitated just now, will kill myself for me. This. The soldiers heard Manga's order, and they all pointed their guns at their heads with trembling hands. Hey, what are you doing? Do you really have to obey such an order? Kirby, who was constantly tugging at Luffy's clothes, couldn't help but shout at those soldiers when he saw that those soldiers were actually following Manga's orders and preparing to commit suicide. Luffy looked at the scene in front of him a little speechlessly, although it is a soldier's duty to obey orders, but this kind of commander has no one to stop reporting. It can only be said that the internal system of the Navy is not perfect enough. Hey, what's going on with your Navy? Why'd I think that your commander is more like a pirate than a pirate? Don't you report it? Or so many people can't stop him alone? For such a thing, Luffy said that it was uncomfortable not to ask. It was best for these navies to resist and save themselves from wasting their own energy. This. The Navy's soldiers who were hesitating whether to pull the trigger heard Luffy's question, and they were speechless, but their faces were somewhat resentful. Well, why don't you do it? Why, you think that if you are instigated twice, you can disobey the order of my supreme commander? Seeing that his soldiers seemed to be moved by Luffy's words, Manga was a little angry, and with a wave of the iron axe in his right hand, he scolded loudly. That domineering appearance directly made the originally somewhat excited naval soldiers lower their heads one after another. Alas, I can't stand you, so I won't choose to become a navy. Luffy shook his head. Since you don't resist, then I'll have to do it myself. Why, you don't think you can deal with me alone, do you? Who do you think I am? I'm Manga the Axeman, the greatest man in Shelds. Seeing that Luffy seemed to have the idea of making a move, Manga raised the axe in his right hand and pointed at Luffy with the tip of the axe, and his jaw, which was wrapped in iron material, lifted slightly, and it seemed that he didn't pay attention to Luffy at all. Huh, Luffy chuckled, and then his right hand shook and punched out. The invisible air froze slightly under this punch, and with a bang, Manga's originally swaggering face was thrown to the side, and at the same time, the tall body also flew backwards with the help of his cheeks. There is no domineering add-on, it's just that the rubber fruit stretches out its arm and punches, and the power of Luffy's punch has reached the power of the jet pistol after Luffy opened the second gear in the original book. Manga's tall figure flew upside down, smashing directly into the gate of the execution ground and part of the wall. Until Manga's body slammed to the ground, the side of the face that was originally slightly vicious was already swollen high, and the person rolled his eyes and fainted. In the dust, those navies who were originally holding guns for themselves or Luffy and others froze in place, and even Kirby, who was originally holding Luffy, had his eyes wide open. Only Zoro, who was tied to a cross stake behind him, opened his eyes at the moment when Luffy punched, as if he wanted to see Luffy's movements. So fast, although I don't know how he knocked over that naval leader from such a distance, but I didn't even see his punch clearly. At this time, Soren's heart set off a storm, although he originally felt that the other party was very strong, but he was not bad. He thought that he could at least be on par with the other party, but it wasn't until the other party really made a move just now that Sauron found that he couldn't even keep up with the other party's speed. How? Do you still think you can beat me now? Luffy said as if sensing Zoro's shock, turning his head slightly and turning to Zoro who was still tied. Cut. Now that it's settled, why don't you help me untie the rope? My knife is still with that stupid son of the bastard Navy. Hearing Luffy's words, the corners of Zoro's mouth twitched, and he skipped the topic directly. And what about you? Are you going to continue to fight us? Turning around, Luffy's right hand pressed down the straw hat that was blown away by the air current, and the eyes that were obscured by the shadow of the brim looked at the navy that was still frozen in place. Those navies who were still stunned only came back to their senses after hearing Luffy's question. They didn't answer Luffy's question. They just threw down the weapons in their hands at the same time, and then jumped up with ecstasy on their faces. It's great, I finally don't have to be oppressed by Manga anymore. Yay! For a while, the clatter of weapons landing was mixed with the cheers of the soldiers, and the originally peaceful execution square was extremely noisy for a while. How is it, Kirby, seeing such a Manga? Are you still planning to become a navy? Putting down the hand that was originally pressed on the straw hat, Luffy asked Kirby, who was untying Zoro. At this time, Sauron, who was waiting for Kirby to loosen his ties, also looked at Kirby. So you want to be a Navy? Then you have to be careful that you will meet such a commander in the future. Zoro's originally frightened face said to Kirby with a wicked smile. Yes, I still want to become a Navy. I want to arrest all pirates like Arita, and I will also work hard to become an admiral. And I will definitely wipe out a Navy like Manga when the time comes. I hope you don't become that deserter from the battlefield, and post-war virgin, Kirby in the future. Luffy didn't continue to speak, but looked at the untied Zoro, who was moving his wrist that hadn't moved for a few days because he was tied. How is it? Do you need me to help you get the weapon back? No, the head has already been dealt with by you. If even that stupid son wants you to solve it, then I don't have the face of your boat. Refusing Luffy without hesitation, Zoro moved his body and walked in a certain direction. A big question mark appeared in Luffy's head. Do you think I asked you if you wanted to help because I thought you Zoro couldn't beat Manga's stupid son Belmeber? Hey, I said I don't need your help. I'll be able to get my knife back soon. I'm trying to say that the gate is over here. Obviously Manga is still at the gate. How did you go in the opposite direction? Zoro, who was originally walking in a chic manner, stiffened suddenly, and a black hash appeared on his head, and then turned back angrily, less verbose. This is Nami, our navigator. This is Zoro, a swordsman, that is, the companion I said earlier that we might have. By the way, he is a road idiot. Remember to watch it in the future. Don't let him get separated. In a restaurant in Sheld's town. Luffy first pointed to Nami and introduced Zoro to Nami, and then pointed to Zoro and said to Nami. Hey, the last few words are superfluous. Sauron, who had been hungry for days, was feasting on the food on his plate, and did not forget to take a few sips of wine from his wine glass. When he heard Luffy's second half, his throat seemed to be choked, and he quickly pinched his neck, hammered his chest a few times, and then yelled at Luffy. Yes, I remember. Nami replied matter-of-factly, her eyes full of cunning. Ahem. Sauron, who had already been relieved, was choked again. So, when we're done with this meal, it's time for us to go. Where is the next stop? Stuffing a piece of meat into his mouth, Luffy turned to look at Nami and asked for the itinerary. After all, Luffy doesn't know navigation at all, so it's up to Nami to leave all the sailing routes and everything. Before, for Kirby, Luffy had to see if the other party's personality was like the original book, but now for Nami, Luffy does fully believe that the other party has the amazing sailing skills in the original book. Maybe this is a double standard. Speaking of Kirby, after dealing with Manga, Kirby made a request to become a navy with the lieutenant in the group of naval soldiers, and the lieutenant directly agreed. This is also normal. After all, the current Luffy has not shouted that I want to be the king of the pirates all day long, and he answered that he was a pirate without anyone asking, although he solved the Manga. But how to say it is also a favor for those navies, even if it is for this town in addition to a harm. The other party will naturally not clean up himself as a pirate for no reason. And Kirby also naturally made a request to join the navy and was agreed. Since you are going to the Great Voyage, the chart of the Great Voyage is a must. After all, I have never been to the Great Voyage. I heard that the pirate, Bucky Clown, has a chart of the Great Voyage, and he seems to be in Orangetown recently, so let's go to Orangetown. Nami touched her white chin and pondered for a while. Nami seems to know a lot about the recent situation in the East China Sea, so she must have done her homework to sail with her. Luffy was a little moved. The original invitation, the other party not only agreed directly, but also made various preparations in order to go to sea with him, which strengthened Luffy's determination to protect Nami. Bucky the Clown? I remember seeing his bounty before. It seems to be as much as 15 million Baileys, and it should be one of the stronger ones in the East China Sea. Hearing Nami say Bucky, Sauron, who had been eating all the time, raised his head slightly and said, but it shouldn't be your opponent. As if remembering the strength that Luffy had shown before, Zoro added another sentence and continued to eat the meal he hadn't finished yet. Luffy, is it okay? Hearing Zoro say that Bucky's bounty was 15 million Bailey, Nami looked at Luffy with some concern. Although Zoro said that Bucky was not Luffy's opponent, but Nami was still not very relieved. After all, a bounty of 15 million Bailey, the original evil dragon also offered a bounty of 20 million Bailey. Nami has seen the strength of the evil dragon with her own eyes. Although she was knocked out by Luffy's grandfather with a punch in the end, but after all, Luffy's grandfather is a naval hero, and Nami doesn't think it's strange to be able to do this. But Luffy, it's not that Nami doesn't believe in Luffy, but Nami hasn't seen Luffy shoot. Although Yarita was kicked and stunned by Luffy, but the other party seems to only have a 5 million Bailey bounty, so Nami doesn't know how far Luffy's strength has been idiographic period. Don't worry, Nami, Bucky is not a powerful pirate, although the other party has an extraordinary background, but his own strength is not very good. Luffy said in a flat tone, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. Although Luffy can't figure out whether Bucky is really weak or hiding his strength, Luffy is not worried. Even if the other party really hides his strength, with Luffy's current strength, he will not be false to the other party no matter what, unless his hidden strength reaches the level of Shanks, but this should be impossible, right? Seeing Luffy's indifferent expression, not as if she was comforting herself, Nami let go of her worries slightly and breathed a sigh of relief. In that case, let's go to Orangetown. It just so happens that Orangetown is not far from this Sheld's town. Even if it is not for the nautical chart, we have to pass through Orangetown, and this is just the right way. Phew, I haven't eaten for a few days, and now I'm finally full. After drinking the last sip of wine that was taken by himself, Zoro stretched out his waist with his arms wide open. But why did you eat more than me? Seeing the plates piled up in front of Luffy, Zoro was a little speechless again. Obviously he was hungry. Okay, what's the matter with this person? Eat more to have strength. Luffy replied as a matter of course, although it is no longer the original Luffy. But Luffy's appetite has not changed in the slightest. It is still outrageous. Is it a side effect of eating rubber fruits? Or is D's diet like this? Thinking of his grandfather Garp in this life, Luffy couldn't help but secretly guess. Makes sense. Hearing Luffy's answer, Zoro touched his chin and seemed to affirm Luffy's statement. At this time, he finally noticed that Nami was already full of plates in front of Luffy, and finally couldn't help but roar. There is a far truth. No matter how much you can eat, there must be a limit, right? Seeing that Zoro didn't continue to refute Luffy, but instead admitted Luffy's statement, Nami was worried about her own arrival at sea for the first time. Luffy was so good at eating, shouldn't all the supplies be eaten up by Luffy during the voyage? Looking at Nami's familiar and unfamiliar posture, Luffy was in a trance for a while, and he seemed to be back to when he first read the manga, but the difference is that he is no longer a spectator, but a person in the painting. But Luffy didn't laugh either. His body's absorption of food can be said to be quite outrageous, and it seems that it has really reached the point of life return. Laughs. Okay, now that we're full of food and drink, it's time for us to go. The trip has just begun. It's not good to stay somewhere for a long time. Stretching. Luffy stood up, looked at the boat moored on the shore in the distance, and said to Nami and Zoro. Oh, Nami and Zoro responded with a slight excitement and stood up at the same time. In this way, two sturdy and slender figures embarked on the journey again. Is this Orangetown? It feels so desolate. There is not even a figure. Must they all be killed by Bucky the Clown? The three figures stood not far from the outside of Orangetown, looking at the deserted streets not far away, as well as a row of buildings that had become ruins, and the beautiful figure with long orange curly hair sighed with emotion, and while speaking, the slender figure shuddered slightly. Probably not. There's no smell of blood wafting from the town. The green sturdy figure replied, its sharp eyes and the three knives pinned to its waist exuding the air of a beast everywhere. What do you want to do so much? Go in and see everything, Luffy said to Nami and Zoro as he lifted his straw hat and walked towards the town. Seeing this, Nami and Zoro also followed Luffy left and right. The three of them walked on the streets of Orangetown. Looking around, the surroundings were deserted, and they couldn't even see a single figure. If it weren't for the fact that all the buildings in this town were intact except for the row of ruins, Luffy and the others would have thought that this was some abandoned town. Luffy unfolded his domineering look, and a hint of red light flashed in his eyes, and then, the situation in the entire Orangetown was presented in Luffy's mind. The Bucky pirates are on the roof of the bar in front. Let's go straight over. Pointing to a bar not far away, Luffy turned to Nami and Zoro. Is it really that convenient again? I've heard Luffy say that I've seen and heard that I'm domineering, but this effect is too good. Every time I just arrive at the destination, Luffy can directly find the target of this trip. Nami said that this ability is too convenient. What is that? Zoro on the side heard Nami's words, and then connected with Luffy's actions, and couldn't help but ask curiously. Luffy, who was walking in front, paused for a moment, then continued to move forward, while explaining in his mouth. The so-called domineering is a power that can strongly feel the opponent's voice. Once this power is awakened and improved, it can read the location and number of enemies outside of sight, as well as the actions that the opponent will take in the next moment, and I relied on this power to sense the location of Bucky's gang. Originally, I was going to wait until I got to the sea restaurant Barati and then explain it to them, but since Sauron asked, let's explain it a little. With Soren's talent, maybe after learning about it, he will be able to master it soon. I still have this ability, so can I awaken this power? Zoro was obviously interested in this kind of power that could make him stronger. Seeing and hearing domineering is an innate ability of living beings, just like instinct, but most people are not aware of this power, or want to exert it but cannot exert it in their lifetime. But if someone can help guide it, it should not be difficult to master this power. Luffy thought about it, although his domineering spirit was awakened by encountering various crises when he was a child in the wild, but after all, there is still a place like Nine Snake Island, and there are still other ways to guide this power. But I don't know how to do it, I can only tell you how I woke up, and the rest is up to you for now. After a pause, Luffy continued, and in addition to seeing and hearing domineering, there are also two kinds of domineering. Namely armed domineering and overlord domineering. Armed domineering and seeing and hearing domineering. Both can be awakened and improved through cultivation. Different from the perception of seeing and hearing domineering, armed domineering is a kind of power that can improve people's attack power and defense. And the armed color domineering that can improve attack and defense? What is that? Have you mastered it? Hearing that in addition to seeing and hearing the color domineering, there are also armed color domineering and overlord color domineering. Zoro immediately wondered how far Luffy had reached. Nami on the side didn't speak, but just looked at Luffy with beautiful eyes. Maybe this was an opportunity for her to understand Luffy's strength. Luffy didn't answer immediately, but stretched out his right hand, and then, in the curious eyes of Zoro and Nami, between the fists of his right hand, it seemed that an invisible force was wrapped around it, and then, Luffy's right fist, which was originally a normal color, was suddenly covered with a layer of pitch-black metallic luster. Zoro, you can attack me with your knife and try, maybe it can make you feel this power better. As for Nami, Luffy feels that with her physical fitness, there should be no way to awaken the armed color domineering. But Luffy doesn't need Nami to master the armed color domineering, as long as she can master the domineering of seeing and hearing colors, and seeing and hearing domineering has no requirements for physical fitness. Zoro didn't talk nonsense, he directly pulled out one of the three knives at his waist and slashed at Luffy's blackened right hand in Nami's worried eyes. Although the two only met on the first day, Zoro had an inexplicable trust in Luffy, so even if Luffy asked him to cut him, Zoro did not hesitate to swing his knife and cut it, because he believed that the other party would be fine. Chang Chang came from the place where Zoro's swinging knife touched Luffy's right hand. Putting the knife back into its sheath, Zoro looked at Luffy's unscathed right hand in surprise, and once again felt the gap between himself and Luffy. Even if he didn't use much strength just now, Zoro felt that even if he swung the knife with all his might, it was estimated that he wouldn't be able to hurt Luffy in the slightest, which made Zoro anxious and more eager to master this power. If he could master this power, would he be one step closer to the world's #1 swordsman? And Nami on the side was already surprised at this time and didn't know what to say. If even the sword couldn't hurt Luffy, then coupled with the characteristics of Luffy's rubber fruit, did it mean that Luffy was not afraid of any attack? In fact, Nami and Zoro are both thinking about it. Luffy's current domineering strength are not ridiculously strong. Even if they are not domineering, as long as the attack is strong enough, they can still cause damage to Luffy, but at present, Zoro has not reached the point of cutting iron, and he is indeed not a big threat to himself. So what about the Overlord color domineering? What kind of power is that? Seeing the armed color domineering, and understanding the color domineering, Zoro and Nami were also full of curiosity about another kind of domineering at this time. As for the Overlord color domineering, it is an ability that cannot be obtained through cultivation. Only one person in a million people has this power, not to mention the rest. Although Zoro may also have the Overlord color qualification, it is not too late to talk about these when he awakens. Zoro suddenly had the urge to draw his sword. Nami also gave Luffy a bad look in anger, and said that she was a bad guy who half-hung people's appetites. Shall we just break in or not? At the door of the bar, Nami glanced at the situation at the bar, and asked Luffy and Zoro a little nervously, mainly looking at Luffy. After all, Luffy is the one he is familiar with, although the two have only met a few times. Sauron had already pressed his hand to the hilt of his sword, even if he wasn't wearing his trademark turban, the corners of his mouth raised from the corners of his demonic mouth revealing a beastly aura. The door of the bar was open, and it was empty except for the crooked tables and chairs, and there were many wineglasses scattered on the counter, although the shelves seemed to be gone. Everyone is on the roof, don't be so nervous, Let's go directly to the roof. Even if there is a fight at that time, it's nothing. I don't feel a threatening aura when I see and hear. Perceiving the strength of the opponent is also one of the effects of seeing and hearing the domineering. Luffy is a little more disappointed in Buggy. To be honest, Luffy still hopes that there will be a strong fight with him now, so that he can understand his current strength, no matter how he says that there is still a difference between humans and animals, and his domineering spirit has not been able to break through, and it is also the reason for the lack of fierce battles. If Buggy was hiding his strength, he might be able to fight well, but with the information that Luffy perceived domineeringly, the red-nosed man on the roof of the building wearing a captain's costume and a captain's hat was obviously not enough to pose a threat to himself. Let's talk about it first. When the time comes, the swordsman will be mine. After seeing Luffy's strength and learning about the power of domineering, Zoro looked forward to fighting even more, because Luffy said when explaining domineering that combat is the easiest way to awaken and improve domineering. No problem, but with your strength, no one in the Buggy Pirates can pose any threat to you except Buggy. This is the truth. Don't look at the original book. Zoro seems to have a hard time fighting Kabaji, but it was only when Zoro was stabbed by Buggy first, and now that Luffy is here, if he can still let Buggy stab Zoro when he knows the plot, then Luffy will simply buy a piece of tofu and kill him. Oh, so that Buggy is strong. Hearing Luffy say this, Zoro immediately noticed that Luffy was talking about something other than Buggy, and a look of interest flashed on his face, obviously wanting to meet that clown Buggy for a while. It's not that Buggy the clown is strong, it's that he's a devil fruit ability, and his ability happens to be a swordsman's nemesis. Luffy shook his head and explained to Zoro. Devil fruit? Is it the same as Luffy? Nami, who heard Luffy say that Buggy the clown had also eaten devil fruit, looked around as if looking for something. Devil fruits? Is there really such a thing? And you've eaten it too? Hearing Luffy's words and Nami's rhetorical question, a series of questions came out of Zoro's mouth. Devil fruit abilities are different. There can't be two exactly the same devil fruits. I eat rubber fruits. My body can be stretched and deformed at will like rubber, and it has a great injury-free effect on non-sharp weapon attacks, while Buggy eats a split fruit, which can break down the body into pieces, which can be said to be completely immune to sharp weapon cutting, so unless the swordsman does not use the sword to attack, the slash is completely ineffective for him. Seeing that both of them seemed to be interested, Luffy went on to explain, but people with devil fruit abilities can't swim, and if they fall into the sea, they will be weak. So if I accidentally fall into the sea in the future, I will have to rely on you to save me. Since you invited me to be your companion, then I naturally won't let you sink into the sea, but you have actually eaten devil fruits. I really don't know how strong you are now. Zoro stared closely at Luffy's figure walking in front of him. A hint of excitement flashed in his eyes, but he quickly restrained himself. This world is very big, even if I am already very strong in this East China Sea, but when it comes to the Great Voyage or even the New World, then this strength is far from enough. As if sensing Zoro's strong fighting spirit, Luffy sighed as he pushed open the door to the rooftop. Who are you? Hey, who are you? Just after Luffy pushed open the door, the person who was originally guarding the door seemed to be startled, but after seeing the faces of Luffy and the three of them, the pirate minions who only thought they were ordinary people yelled at Luffy and the three of them again. I heard that the Buggy Pirates are having a banquet here? Ignoring the little minion's question, Luffy looked around and locked his gaze on the red-nosed man on the throne not far away. The pirates are indeed happy to have a banquet, but Luffy is not here to attend the banquet. Luffy grabbed the doorkeeper's collar and threw him directly to the banquet table under the minion's frightened gaze with his right hand. For these pirates who plunder civilians at will, Luffy will not be soft. As the minions screamed and flew to the table, the members of the Buggy Pirates, who were originally partying, stopped drinking and eating meat and looked at the source of the screams. Ah! With the screams of the pirates who were thrown out, the table was smashed, and then there was a series of pops, and the table that was originally full of food and wine was torn apart in an instant. Sawdust flew, wine and food were scattered on the ground, and the scene was a mess. Who is it? Stand up, dare to come to Uncle Bucky's territory to spread wild. An angry roar sounded from the mouth of the red-nosed man who was originally sitting in the main seat. The pirates, who were originally stunned by the sudden attack, also drew their swords and looked at Luffy and the others at the gate. Who are you? Don't you know that Uncle Ben is having a banquet here? After seeing Luffy and the three of them, the red-nosed man got up from his chair and roared at Luffy, who was walking in front. Bucky the clown? Luffy began, his gaze directed at the red-nosed man. Now that you know it's Uncle Ben, you still dare to make trouble. Are you not small? Bucky's ridiculous face was full of anger at this time. Bucky-sama, what do you say? Do you want to arrest them? I think there's a pretty girl there, hee. As soon as Bucky's words were finished, there was a little minion underneath who was about to move, and after noticing Nami next to Luffy, his eyes lit up, and he asked Bucky with a lewd smile. I don't know if I'm alive or dead. Luffy's eyes froze, and his sharp gaze swept towards the unabashed minion, and the invisible momentum pressed towards him like a tide. As Luffy's cold words fell, the pirate minion who had a lustful look in his eyes and a wicked smile on his face stiffened, and then his eyes rolled, and in the incomprehensible gazes of the other pirates around him, his body went limp, and he fell directly to the ground. Hey, feed. What's the matter with you? Didn't you just drink too much? Haha. Why did you faint? You're so useless, aren't you? In the face of this sudden change, the little minions of the Bucky pirates only thought that the fallen brother had drunk too much, and laughed one after another, completely unaware of what was happening. Is this overlord domineering? As a former crew member of the Roger Pirates, even if it was only a trainee crew member, Bucky had naturally seen the overlord domineering, and the other party was able to control the overlord domineering to only stun one person, which made Bucky's already angry face even more difficult to see. What kind of person are you? Boss Bucky, what's wrong? Is there anything special about the other party? At this time, a man on a wheelbarrow and wrapped in a scarf standing next to Bucky saw Bucky's ugly face and asked with some confusion. Shut up, you idiots! Bucky yelled at his unknown men who were still taunting his brother. With Bucky's roar, the originally noisy scene fell silent for a moment, and those minions looked at me and I looked at you, completely unable to understand why their captain could suddenly be so angry. Not only did Bucky stare at Luffy, but even Zoro and Nami looked at Luffy the first time that minion fell to the ground, and although they didn't see Luffy make a move, their intuition told them that this was what Luffy did. After all, as soon as that minion made a disrespectful remark, Luffy glared at the other party with a cold gaze, and it seemed that it was this glance that made that minion faint directly. And Bucky's muttering just now, the two of them really heard it clearly. This is the overlord color domineering? The two still don't understand how Luffy did it. Could it be that the so-called overlord color domineering is a dream that stunned people through their eyes? But Nami doesn't care what the overlord color is domineering. She only knows that Luffy made a move because that minion had bad thoughts about herself, which made Nami a little happy in her heart. It seems that Luffy still cares about herself. Zoro is more concerned about whether Luffy still has any strength that has not been revealed. One day today, since he was rescued by Luffy, what Luffy showed completely broke Zoro's original worldview. Zoro had the idea that he was still very weak for the first time, but this also strengthened his decision to follow Luffy. Only by following such a person, he may have the opportunity to challenge the throne of the world's #1 swordsman. For a while, the burning ambition in Zoro's heart is burning. Mancha D. Luffy, this is my name. Speaking of which, I have heard Shanks mention you, as Shanks's former partner. I thought you were at least a sea thief with a bounty of more than 100 million, but I didn't expect you to be just a red-nosed clown nesting in the East China Sea. Holding the straw hat on top of his head, Luffy didn't care about the sight of Nami and Zoro, but looked at Bucky calmly and said, I'll just say why your damn straw hat is so familiar. It turns out that you know that bastard Shanks, but that bastard actually gave you his most precious hat. It seems that you are not an ordinary little ghost. When Luffy stretched out his hand, Bucky, who had been staring at Luffy, noticed the straw hat on Luffy's head for the first time, and nodded clearly after hearing Luffy's words, but soon became angry again. Who do you say is the red nose? Stinky little ghost. Don't think it's going to be a bully and domineering. You're really as annoying as that Shanks guy. Don't talk nonsense. I'm not looking for you for anything else. Hand over the nautical chart to the Great Voyage. How about we leave immediately? Luffy didn't bother to talk nonsense with him, and directly said his purpose, although he could do it directly, but I don't know if Bucky had a map with him, and he beat people away but couldn't find the map, so it was not a waste of time? You're too arrogant, aren't you? Aren't you looking down on us too much for the Bucky pirates if you let us hand over the map? Before Bucky could speak, a man riding a lion on the other side of him with a full circle of hair on his head said viciously to Luffy, and the lion under his crotch also roared at Luffy and the three of them at the same time, as if he was about to pounce on him. Shut up, Mochi! Bucky drank the man riding the lion for the first time, and then looked at Luffy with a vicious look in his eyes and said, Little ghost, you may be very strong, but Uncle Ben is not a vegetarian. The nautical chart can be given to you, but should you also leave something in exchange? Then it seems that there is no need to talk about it. If you are ordinary people, I can still make a deal with you, since you are pirates. Isn't it normal to plunder and be plundered? For ordinary people, Luffy naturally won't be so unreasonable, but pirates, especially those who burn and loot, Luffy won't reason with each other. Don't look at the original Buggy may be a funny character, but a funny character is not equal to a good person. It's really arrogant, stinky little ghost, but forget it, even if Uncle Ben is unlucky this time, the nautical chart will be given to you, little ones, take that idiot. Let's go. Buggy glanced at Luffy with a gloomy look in his eyes, then took out a barrel-shaped drawing from his chest and threw it at Luffy. Boss Buggy. The little minions below saw that the usually arrogant boss actually confessed this time, and they all looked at Buggy in disbelief, and even the deputy captain Mochi and the chief of staff Kabaji next to him looked at him incredulously. Look at what? Don't go quickly. Buggy was helpless about the incomprehension of his junior brothers. Don't look at the number of people on his side, but these little brothers are in front of the domineering of the overlord. Even if the number of people doubles 10 times and 100 times, it is just a matter of staring at the other party, and he may be able to deal with the other party twice, but it doesn't make any sense. Besides, the other party just wants the nautical chart, not his own treasure, so there is no need for him to have a hard time with the other party. As for the nautical chart, he gave it, and he didn't know how to go to the Great Voyage, but this feud was settled, and when he met at sea in the future, he had to give the other party 2 special Buggy bombs to try. After taking the chart, Luffy threw it directly to Nami without looking at it. As long as Buggy was not stupid, he wouldn't give a fake chart, otherwise his previous compromise would be meaningless. There is no obstacle to the evacuation of Buggy's gang Luffy. This time it is for the sake of Shanks to let the other party go. The next time I meet, this kind of pirate Luffy will not let go. As for letting other ordinary people suffer because he let the other party go, then Luffy can only say that he can't help it, he just needs to do what he thinks. And they're gone. Watching the little brothers pick up the fainted minions and leave with Buggy without looking back, Zoro's hand that had been holding the hilt of the knife didn't know if to let it go. Buggy is not an ordinary pirate, although his strength does not seem to be very good, but his knowledge is indeed top-notch. But with his character, this time he was deflated in our hands, and next time he sees him, he will probably shoot directly at us. Regarding Zoro's puzzlement, Luffy explained a little. Unlike Zoro, although he didn't wait for the end of One Piece, he at least understood the previous plot of Wano Country. Although Buggy seemed to be not afraid of the sky when he was on Roger's ship. Even if he met the Whitebeard pirates, he dared to go up to the hard bar, but looking at his performance after the top, it was obvious that after he set sail, Buggy should have been a lot more cautious, otherwise he would not have been fighting in the East China Sea for so many years, and now after seeing Luffy's domineering and perfect control, he naturally has no idea of a head-on conflict, but I don't know if there will be any small tricks behind it ideographic period. But Luffy doesn't care, not to mention that the sea is so big. Is there a chance to meet the other party again? Even if he does, with Luffy's strength, he can completely fight according to the other party, unless he grows faster than himself. But is this possible? If he can really grow so fast, Buggy will not be the same after so many years. As for attacking Nami and the others, unless Luffy and Nami are separated, it is impossible for Luffy to be domineering with what Luffy has seen and heard. Now that we have the nautical chart, let's find a village and change the ship. Luffy turned his head and said as he looked at Nami, who had opened the nautical chart and studied it. The current situation in this orange town is obviously impossible for Luffy and a few people to change to a ship, so it is estimated that they will have to follow the original book. But Luffy does not plan to change the route. In the case of a prescient plot advantage, who knows what will happen if he changes the route. The next village is the village of Sarab, which is not too far from here, and at the speed of a small boat, it should be there before dark. Nami replied, pointing to a spot on the chart. In that case, let's go. Town. Mayor Mare, it looks like the Buggy pirates are leaving. The camp that had been lifeless suddenly became commotion, and several men with improvised weapons ran out of it and surrounded the man who had just returned. Are you right? Asked. The bespectacled uncle, who was the leader, grabbed the man's shoulder. I'm sure I'm right. There is another small boat that I don't know, and it also left not long after the Buggy pirates left. I don't know if there is a relationship between them. I see that before the Buggy pirates left, there was a pirate who was carried by Buggy's men. The man nodded vigorously, indicating that he was not mistaken, and said what he saw. Did you see the man from that boat? Uncle I, the mayor of Orangetown, guessed that it might be the people on the boat who drove the Buggy pirates away, but only one person from the Buggy pirates was carried away, and he was a little uncertain. Hug. Sorry, Mayor Mare, that I was in a hurry to get back and didn't see clearly. but I saw that there were 3 of them, one of whom was wearing a straw hat. Forget it. Anyway, let's go back to the town to have a look, and after 2 days to confirm that the Bucky pirates will not come back, we will inform everyone to move back. Sailing on this sea is really boring and leisurely. Luffy sighed slightly as he paddled, basking in the sun, feeling the salty smell of the sea breeze. At that time, I should have done it directly, so that my knife is almost rusty now. For Luffy to release Bucky and his gang at that time, Zoro has been broken several times along the way, and after understanding part of Luffy's strength, Zoro is eager to improve himself through fighting. What's so bad? What if I get caught by them? Do you still expect me to have any fighting power as a weak woman, and aren't you rowing to train yourself? Replied Nami, who was sitting on the stern of the boat. So why are the 2 of us rowing while you're resting over there? Zoro could only pout his lips unhappily at Nami's sudden opening, but when he saw Nami's leisurely appearance, he was angry again, and instantly turned into a fangy face and roared. I'm going to study this chart to show you the way, or I'll let you look at the charts like a road idiot? Ignoring Zoro's growl, Nami stretched out and said with a poisonous tongue. The delicate figure that was even more visible because of the stretching of his arms feasted Luffy, who just turned around. Do you want to fight, woman? And Zoro, who heard the word idiot, was even more angry, and almost had the urge to draw his knife and turn his head to slash at Nami, but his subordinates did not stop, but instead accelerated the speed of the oar, so that Luffy also had to speed up to prevent the boat from deviating. Ignoring Zoro, he noticed that Luffy was staring at Nami, and he didn't look shy at all, but winked at Luffy, and then continued to blow the sea breeze leisurely. The 2 of them rowed for an unknown amount of time, but it was still dark, and it should still be some time before it got dark, and the shadow of the land appeared in Luffy's field of vision. Nami, is that the village of Sarab? I'll take a look at. Hearing Luffy's culture, Nami took a look at the nautical chart, and then compared it to the island in the distance. It's not Sharab village, it's an uninhabited island. How about it? Uninhabited island? Oh, it must be the treasure island where the strange man in the box is. Luffy thought about it. After all, it had been 17 years, and although he remembered the general plot, he couldn't remember some of the details. Luffy was a little impressed that there were some strange animals on that island, and there were a number of empty treasure chests, and the others didn't seem to be worth caring about. In that case, is it necessary to go to the island? Luffy thought about it for a while, but decided to go up and have a look. Anyway, he came here, and depending on the size of the island, it wouldn't take much time to go up and take a look. Thinking of this, Luffy nodded. Then let's go up and have a look, maybe there will be some unexpected gains. It turns out that Luffy thinks too much, and on the uninhabited island, except for the strange uncle who is connected to the box, there is only a group of strange animals. But this is also normal. After all, Treasure Island is not an inaccessible and isolated island. On the contrary, the reputation of Treasure Island is still quite famous in the East China Sea. After so many years, I don't know how many treasure hunters have logged onto this uninhabited island. Even if there was really treasure on this island before, it was discovered and taken away as early as I don't know how many years ago. Originally, Nami was quite excited to hear that there might be treasures on this island, and after leaving the indifferent Zoro to sleep on the ship, she went to the island with Luffy, but after Luffy opened the empty boxes, Nami looked completely uninterested. But Luffy is still very curious that people in the pirate world can grow with the treasure chest, which is too strange, not to mention that such a big person can't hold up a wooden box. Even if he falls from a slightly higher place, the box can be broken, right? After getting rid of the uncle's knot, Luffy and Nami returned to the shore where the boat was, because it was a little late. According to Nami, it was difficult to discern the direction at night, so they were going to call Zoro down, spend the night in the woods today, and set off tomorrow at dawn. After a night of silence, the next day Luffy and the 3 of them bid farewell to Uncle Carmen of the treasure chest early, and set off towards Sharab village in the morning light. I didn't expect to meet a pirate ship here. Look at the mark on the pirate flag. Is it the Black Cat Pirates? That's a coincidence. Just when Luffy and the 3 of them were already able to see Sharab village, a pirate ship flying the pirate flag appeared in Luffy's sight. For this pirate flag, Luffy is still a little impressed. After all, there are only a few pirate groups in the East China Sea chapter of the original book, and Luffy basically remembers the flags that appeared, and besides, this is Sharab village. Luffy immediately remembered which pirate group this is. Black Cat Pirates. It is said that their last captain, Baiji Crow, was caught and executed 3 years ago. Why are the pirates still alive without it? As for the Black Cat Pirates, Zoro and Nami, who grew up in the East China Sea, have naturally heard of it. Huh, That's right, and the one who captured that Chloe was the same colonel named Manga that we killed earlier. Oh, I heard that he became the colonel because he captured Chloe. Luffy, who understood the twists and turns, let out a sneer. Oh, listening to your tone, there seems to be something wrong in it? Zoro asked curiously, noticing Luffy's sneer. And Nami on the side also looked at Luffy. She always felt that Luffy seemed to know a lot of things that others didn't know, just like the Buggy pirates she met before, and the Shanks mentioned by Luffy at that time also made Nami a little familiar, but she just couldn't remember where she heard it for a while. Do you really think that with the strength and arrogance that Manga showed before, he will be able to capture Chloe, who has the title of 100 Tricks? And it was said that he was the only one in the Navy who survived. Luffy looked at Zoro and asked. Although Nami hadn't seen Manga before, Zoro had seen it, not to mention the strength of that guy, but with the kind of character he showed, such a person really didn't look like a person with a high IQ who could deal with Chloe, and he was the only one in the Navy who survived at that time, and he also managed to capture Chloe. Now that I think about it, it is indeed full of suspicions, that is, 100 Chloe may still be alive. Opposite is the ship of the Black Cat Pirates. Just go up and ask and you will know everything? It just so happens that we can also give up this small ship. I'll take you up, and the pirates above will be handed over to you. Zoro. Luffy smiled slightly, looking at the pirate ship not far away that seemed to have found himself and the others and wanted to drive over. It just so happens that I don't have a ship. Even if I don't get the Golden Mary on this trip to Sarab village, it is enough to think that I can use this ship to go to the Great Voyage. But I may pity the ship elves of the Mary. Hey, Captain Zangao, there's a small boat ahead. How about it? Do you want to snatch him before you go to Sarab village? On the Black Cat Pirates ship, a younger brother-like person spotted the boat that Luffy and the three of them were on, and suggested to a man wearing a tuxedo, a top hat, and strange glasses. Well, that's fine. There's still a few days left before Captain Chloe's set date, and there's no hurry to meet it for a while. The current captain of the Black Cat Pirates, that is, the hypnotist Zangao, agreed after listening to his younger brother's suggestion. Kudo. Captain Zangao, from that boat. Stretched out from the boat, what a long arm. Just as Zangao agreed and the ship changed direction, the other little brother seemed to notice something and ran over in a panic. At this moment, the three Luffy, who were originally sitting on the boat, flew over in a strange posture by grabbing the railing of the Black Cat pirate ship through Luffy's outstretched arms. Why is it strange? The main thing is that Luffy's right hand stretched out to pull the railing, and his left hand held Zoro's collar, while Nami hugged Luffy's waist tightly, and the hand that hugged Luffy was still carrying a bag of things, which should be Bailey, who was exchanged for treasure before. At this time, Zoro, who was being held by Luffy's collar, was waving his limbs angrily, and at the same time kept shouting bastards and the like in his mouth. A lot of strength made the three people in the air constantly sway from side to side. If it weren't for Luffy's right hand always grasping the railing of the Black Cat pirate ship, several people might have fallen into the sea. Compared to Zoro's anger, Nami seemed quite comfortable, even if the three of them kept shaking because of Zoro's relationship, but in addition to holding Luffy's hand harder, and her pretty face was more close to Luffy's chest, there was still a faint smile on the corner of her mouth. Attention, it's going to land. Seeing that he had appeared over the Black Cat pirate ship, Luffy first withdrew his hand holding the railing, and at the same time threw the Zoro he was holding in his left hand into the Black Cat pirate ship, and then stretched out his right hand down, passing through the crook of Nami's leg, holding Nami's back with his left hand. After Luffy fixed Nami's body, Nami also took the opportunity to put her hands around Luffy's waist to Luffy's neck. Bang! Luffy landed on his feet and stabilized his body, while Nami was held in Luffy's arms in the posture of a princess. Even if she had already boarded the deck of the Black Cat pirate ship, she had no intention of coming down. Unlike Luffy and Nami's smooth login, after being thrown out by Luffy, Zoro could only curl up as much as possible because he couldn't balance his body in the air, and rolled a few more times after landing before jumping violently. It's good that the hat hasn't fallen off, otherwise I'll have to trouble Zoro to pick it up for me. Putting Nami down, Luffy ignored the already stunned group of pirates around him, and seemed to be talking to himself. Although some are reluctant to enjoy the warm touch of the beauty in their arms, it will be a long time to come. Nami, who was put down by Luffy, was a little nostalgic for Luffy's arms for a while, but after seeing that there were pirates around her, she hid behind Luffy as if frightened, and then breathed a sigh of relief. Bastard, are you trying to kill me? Why don't you just throw that woman down? Zarin, who jumped up from the ground, became angry when he saw that Nami was safe and sound. Ah, Who made the family a girl? What happened to Zoro being thrown twice as a man? Nami, who was hiding behind Luffy, looked at Sauron, who was covered in dust and had an embarrassed face, and replied before Luffy spoke, and those good-looking eyes narrowed into a slit. You abominable! Shang! Before Sauron could finish speaking, a thin figure attacked from behind him. As the sound of gold and iron rang out, Zoro pulled out one of the 3 knives at his waist before the attack was about to arrive, and suddenly turned back to block the surprise claw. It's not a good habit to sneak attack while others are talking. After turning his head to see who had attacked him, a gloomy voice came from the corners of Zoro's slightly hideous mouth. That's really sorry, but it's not a good habit for your excellency to suddenly break into someone else's ship, right? The thin catman didn't speak, and it was the hypnotist captain in a tuxedo dress who spoke. Bang long and long. As Zango's words fell, the pirate brothers who had recovered from the sudden shock all drew their weapons, and looked at Luffy and the 3 of them with evil smiles on the corners of their mouths. There is no need to talk about etiquette for pirates who have done bad things. Luffy glanced at the pirates around him who were sharpening their knives, and then his hands suddenly stretched out. With Luffy's hands flicking, the pirates who surrounded Luffy and the 3 of them only had time to let out a scream of, "Ah!" and they all flew upside down into the sea. I'll leave the rest of the feline brothers to you, Zoro. Reminding Zoro, Luffy looked at Zangao again, who had not yet recovered. As for you, just stand still and wait for them to finish fighting, and they still have something to ask you. You. Are you a devil fruit ability? The legend is actually true. There really is a devil fruit, was only reported by the younger brother before, but now he saw Luffy's casually outstretched arm with his own eyes, and he staggered and sat on the deck. Sure enough, the devil fruit in the East China Sea is a legend, and basically no one has seen it, even the Black Cat Pirates, who are quite famous in the East China Sea, except for the former Captain Chloe. Even the current Captain Zangao only regards the devil fruit as a legend. Since the captain has explained, then let me deal with you. Zoro directly pulled out the other 2 knives on his waist, one with the hilt in his mouth and bitten with his teeth, and the other in his originally empty left hand. 3 knife stream. It's actually Roronoa Zoro, a pirate hunter known as a Warcraft, but when you meet our Catman brothers, it doesn't matter if you are a pirate hunter or whatever, you can only be killed by us. Sam the thin catman saw Soren's posture of using 3 knives, and immediately recognized Zoro, but his tone was still arrogant. Captain Zangao was actually frightened by others. What a shame. The fat catman Buggy looked at his own frightened captain. How dare you say it? Then you can take it. Zoro raised his hands, pointed the tips of the double knives in his hands downward, and the hilt of the knife was facing up and his back was behind his left. His hands formed a rectangular shape, and the big fast knife and the word Dao Yi in his mouth were horizontal in front of the 2 knives. 3 knife streams. Tiger hunting. It's a big move to come up. After all, the ship itself has to be ridden by 3 people, and if the fight is too long, it may damage the ship, so it's better to fight quickly. Thinking of this, Zoro rushed forward and slashed at Sam, the skinny catman, 3 times at great speed. Phew! The sound of the blade piercing his body sounded, and Sam, the skinny catman who was originally ready to attack, flew out directly with blood splashing upside down. Next is you. Zolan, who appeared in the original position of the thin catman Sam, pointed to the side of the blade in both hands, turned his head slightly, and drove the knife in his mouth to slash a sharp edge, and his sharp eyes swept to the location of the fat catman Buggy. Sam, you bastard, I'm going to kill you. Seeing his brother being slashed by the other party, the fat catman Buggy's eyes erupted with fire, and the fat body jumped high and slammed into the direction of Zoro. 3 knife streams. Ghost slash. The knives in both hands were quickly crossed in front of his chest. Looking at the fat figure that was about to fall, Zoro squatted slightly with his legs, and before Buggy's body arrived, he kicked hard under his feet, and the double knives that were originally crossed on his chest and the words of Hedao across his mouth slashed out. The 2 figures staggered, and Buggy's fat body spewed out 3 bloody arrows, which fell heavily on the deck, and the force of the fall was completely cut by Zoro, and Buggy, who only had his own gravity, only smashed part of the deck slightly. Zoro fell lightly from midair, inserting his 2 knives into the scabbard before removing the word and the Dao in his mouth and putting it into the scabbard. It's so strong. Nami, who had been hiding behind Luffy, was the first time she had seen Zoro make a move, and she directly solved the 2 opponents who didn't look weak in just 2 moves, covering her mouth with her hands for a while, and her beautiful eyes were full of surprise. I actually defeated the Catman brothers in 2 moves, you. Zhang, who had been sitting down since just now, saw that the 2 people on the boat who were second only to the original captain were killed by others in 2 moves, and he was a little unacceptable for a while. I've heard that a powerful swordsman can slash with flying slashes and can easily cut through steel, but I don't know if Zoro has reached that point. Cut the steel. Hearing Luffy's words, Zoro was slightly stunned. What the master had said came to mind at this time: cut off what you want to cut, and cut what you don't want to cut. It seems that he is still far behind. The current self can't cut steel, and he can't swing a flying slash. These things that even Luffy, who is not a swordsman, knows, and he, a person who aims to be the world's #1 swordsman, doesn't know. It seems that his cultivation is far from enough. Whether it's domineering or swordsmanship, your own cultivation is far from enough. How could such a thing happen? Knowing what happened from Zango's mouth, Nami looked incredible. Not only Nami was surprised, but even Luffy, who knew the plot, was surprised. Can Zango's hypnotism last for so long without failing? Or can it be permanently effective? If so, Zango may still be a talent. Luffy touched his chin and directly raised his question. My abilities don't work all the time, even if that navy has been beaten by Captain Chloe at that time into delirium, weak will, and hypnosis is also successful. But hypnosis is hypnosis, and it is impossible to change a person's memory forever. At least I can't. Zango, who was beaten, had a blue nose and swollen face at this time, and when he heard Luffy's question, he answered cautiously while holding the rudder. Does that mean that Manga has long since regained consciousness, but he didn't mean to report it at all? Zoro asked, resting with his hands behind the back of his head, resting against the planks along the side of the boat, hearing Zango's explanation. It should be like this. At that time, Captain Chloe also waited for a while, and saw that the navy was completely silent before starting his plan. It seems that you can't bear the power in your hands. It's really disgusting navy. For Nami, who was trapped by Colonel Mouse, the appearance of a navy like Colonel Monka is simply a shame for Burmel, who is also a navy. Thinking of Burmel, Nami's eyes dimmed, and she was a little depressed for a while. As if sensing Nami's loss, Luffy patted Nami on the shoulder and didn't say anything. Feeling Luffy's concern, Nami cleaned up her mood and showed a bright smile to Luffy. Just when several people stopped talking and the ship was a little silent, the trace of the island finally appeared not far away. Sarab village is about to arrive. Let's get ready to get off the boat, Luffy said to Nami and Zoro after seeing the island, while glancing at Zango, who was still sailing. As for you, just watch the boat here. If you're lucky, we get another boat, you can leave on your own. Otherwise, just continue to drive us on the boat. Hearing Luffy's threat, Zango trembled, although he didn't know what Luffy said about seeing and hearing domineering. But I thought it should be some kind of monitoring thing. After seeing the strength of Luffy and Zoro, Zango had no idea of resisting, and he was just watching the boat or driving the boat. At least for now, his life was not in danger. Thinking of this, Zango nodded hurriedly and continued to steer the ship straight in the direction of the island. Just as Luffy and the 3 of them got off the boat and walked towards Sharab village, there was a lot of movement from the high slope not far away, and at the same time, a slightly nervous young man's voice sounded. Hey, you pirates, stop advancing immediately. This is the territory of the great pirate Captain Usopp. If you continue to advance, my 80 million men will attack. As a brown-clad boy with a long nose jumped out from behind the bushes, a number of flags appeared around him, rising and sinking among the bushes. Even if you lie, at least make it up a little. You live on such a big island with 80 million people. Nami was a little speechless. How naive the other party was. What? Dismantled. Hearing Nami's words, Usopp, who was already a little nervous, suddenly trembled in his legs, and his voice was a little distorted. All right, we're not pirates yet, and we don't do anything to you. We just want to come here and buy a ship. For Usopp, Luffy is a little entangled in whether to invite the other party on the ship. After Luffy explained his intentions, Usopp's originally trembling body and deformed voice suddenly returned to normal, and enthusiastically led Luffy and the 3 of them to a certain restaurant in the village, not at all embarrassed by the fact that the previous deception was exposed. The richest family in the whole village of Sarab, but the housekeeper there is a bit of a nuisance, and if you want to buy a boat, the butler won't necessarily pay attention to you. Sitting at the dinner table, Usopp was interested in talking about a wealthy family, but not so happy when he spoke of a housekeeper. What's wrong with that butler? Nami propped her chin in one hand, a little surprised that someone like Usopp could visibly hate someone. That butler should be the last captain of the Black Cat Pirates, the 100 Tricks, who should have been executed. Presumably this wealthy family in Sarab village is his target. Luffy took Nami's question and said the answer directly. Could it be that the plan that Zangao said is? I hadn't thought of it at first, but Luffy said it, so it was obvious that the plan I heard from Zangao before and the person who implemented the plan was this person. What are you talking about? What kind of pirates? Planned, although Chloe makes me feel uncomfortable, but the rest of the village trusts him quite a lot. How can he be a pirate? Usopp was a little confused by Luffy and Nami, but when it came to Miss Koya, Usopp had to ask clearly. Luffy looked at Usopp with interest. Maybe he could make up his mind about inviting him this time. We're talking about it. That butler is the captain of the Black Cat Pirates who should have been executed 3 years ago, 100 Tricks Crow. And the reason why he came here to be a housekeeper is for the family's property. It seems that we are very unfortunate to come. As far as we know, that guy may be ready to do it. Luffy said unhurriedly, with some kind of demagoguery in his tone. If that's the case, then it's a. Damn, you guys eat here now. I have something to go out. Hearing Luffy's words, he didn't wonder if what Luffy said was true. Usopp said goodbye and hurriedly left with his purse. Regardless of whether what Luffy said was true or not, Usopp himself had sensed that something was wrong with the butler from a long time ago, but at that time, Usopp only thought that it was because he was unlikable, and the other party had won the trust of others, and he was jealous of him because of this. But now, Luffy's words made Usopp's heart tighten. Thinking of the gentle lady, Usopp clenched his fists. Don't have an accident, Kia. Just let him go to the butler. He doesn't look like someone who can deal with a pirate captain, does he? Picking up the wooden wine glass in front of him, Soren's hand resting on the hilt of the saber at his waist. Nami also looked at Luffy. For the encouragement in Luffy's words just now, Nami can be said to hear it clearly, but she doesn't know Luffy's reason for doing this. But Nami believes that Luffy will not deliberately let others die. I promised Jesus that when I went to sea, if I saw his son, and if his son had the strength to go to sea, he would invite his son to my ship. Jesus Bu, another name that I am familiar with, and Shanks before it. Luffy, who are they? Compared to what Luffy said about the son of Jesus Bu, when Luffy said this, Nami guessed that Usopp was the son of Jesus Bu, but what made Nami care more was the name of Jesus Bu. Nami doesn't know. I thought you should have known about the forces at sea. It's no wonder that when she talked about Shanks in front of Bucky the Clown before, Nami looked calm. But it shouldn't be. In the original episode, Usopp knew that the red-haired Shanks was a great pirate, and there was no reason why Nami wouldn't know. Don't look surprised. Stupid. I have to focus on navigation after all. How can I have so much time to remember other things? Nami felt like she had been hit by an arrow in the knee for Luffy's surprise. Really, she was so understanding before. How could this be like this? Luffy was speechless about Nami's sudden anger. He didn't mean to mock her. Hey, is this a woman? The 4 emperors have red hair, so you should remember, right? Since Nami is familiar with the names of Shanks and Jesus, it is obvious that she has read the relevant reports in the newspaper, and Luffy should be able to remember it as long as she reminds her. Hey, what are you two talking about? What are the 4 emperors? Shanks was supposed to be a well-informed bounty hunter, but Zoro now acted like he didn't look like a bounty hunter at all. Forget it, don't want to say it. Nami glanced at Zoro, not at all trying to explain it to him. Hey, you woman, I'll cut you. Zoro was immediately driven crazy by Nami's meaningful glance. Luffy took a bite of the meat, and seeing that Nami really didn't mean to explain, he had to speak himself. Since swordsmen have the existence of standing at the apex, then the pirates naturally have people who stand out, and among these powerful pirates, the 4 pirate groups standing at the apex are collectively called the 4 emperors, and these 4 pirate groups are also the closest to the existence of One Piece. Speaking of which, the current number 1 swordsman in the world, Hawkeye, seems to have a good relationship with Shanks. Luffy also glanced at Zoro at the end. I see, then it seems that getting on your ship is a pretty correct choice for me. You will definitely go to that Shanks in the future, right? Then I will know the whereabouts of Hawkeye then. Hearing Luffy mention Hawkeye, Zoro suddenly became interested. For Zoro's excitement, Luffy doesn't want to hit him, but speaking of Hawkeye, the original book seems to have mentioned that Hawkeye appeared in the East China Sea during this time, and I don't know if I can meet it now. If I do, I won't just watch from the sidelines like the original book. Such a good opportunity. If I seize it, my domineering may be able to go further. However, Soren's words, I only hope that he will not be abused too badly. even if he has told him in advance about the realm of cutting steel and the existence of domineering, but the time is too short. Zoro may not be able to master it in front of the eyes of the eagle. However, there is also a benefit to being abused. The current Soren's vision is only limited to the East China Sea. As the original Sauron said, it is impossible to have such a distance in the world, but it turns out that the distance may be much more than that. Thinking of this, Luffy said directly, "Although I will go to find Shanks, you don't have to wait until that time. I heard that Hawkeye has recently appeared in the East China Sea. Maybe we can meet him before we go to the Great Voyage." Yes, that's great. I've long wanted to know how strong the world number one is. Although he didn't blindly think that he could defeat the other party, Zoro didn't have the slightest fear. The gap may be bigger than you think, Luffy thought to himself. But Luffy didn't say it, and saying it couldn't change Zoro's mind. Rather than that, it was better for him to experience it himself, and he also needed to experience the real powerhouse in this world. Although his grandfather is the top combat power in the pirate world, he has never seen him shoot with all his might, and as for Shanks, he has not seen the other party shoot, and the other party has not reached the current point when they met. As for whether he will be hacked to death directly by Hawkeye, Luffy can only say that even if it is for the sake of Shanks's face, Hawkeye will not make a dead hand. Of course, it doesn't count as his own death, not to mention that Luffy just wants to see the strong man in this world, just as Hawkeye wants to see the gap with the strongest man in the world during the Top War. And in the plot, Riley also said that domineering will only progress rapidly in continuous life and death battles, and this battle may become the first battle in which Luffy's domineering temperament changes. But after all, as for whether or not you can meet Hawkeye, it's still a question of whether you can meet Hawkeye, and for now, we still have to solve the problem of Usopp first. At present, it seems that the first step is a success. At least I don't have to worry about whether to invite him on the ship. Then let's go too. After all, our ship may be counting on the eldest lady that Usopp said, but we can't let her have an accident. No longer thinking about Hawkeye, he ate all the rest of the meat, and seeing that Nami and Zoro had also finished eating, Luffy stood up and said to the two, "Hey, I've been waiting for you for a long time. I don't hate that kid, but I don't want the person who brought us into the village to be killed by someone else." Zoro smiled and held the knife on his waist, and could only say that his expression was worthy of being called a monster. "I hope that lady will give us a boat for free for our help." It can only be said that Nami is still so persistent about Bailey. Just as Luffy and Nami Sauron walked out of the hotel together, they were met by three children armed with wooden daggers. "Hey, you guys are pirates, aren't you? What did you do with our captain?" shouted one of the little boys with a skull on his head. "Could it be? Have you already been killed by them?" The other chubby little boy with glasses looked very flustered, apparently thinking of something bad. "Don't guess, little ones, your captain is probably going to fight the real pirates now." Luffy looked at the three bodies trembling slightly, but still raised the wooden sword in his hand to himself and the three children of Zoro, and smiled slightly. These three people should be Usopp's three little followers, and they saw the fact that Usopp brought the three of them to the hotel before they came. But now only Luffy and a few people have come out, and the three little guys who are not deeply involved in the world still think that Usopp was killed by the three of them. However, Luffy didn't have a bad taste for these three children to scare them. After all, he didn't hate people with courage. Real pirates. Fighting? Hearing Luffy's words, another boy in short sleeves was slightly stunned, and his short sleeves were also painted with a skeleton pattern on his chest. Obviously the three little guys should still yearn for pirates. Although Luffy doesn't hate people with courage, he still doesn't approve of these children thinking about being pirates at a young age, and it's not the kind that can't live without their parents. But people are young, and now they're just doing pirate games, and when they get older, they will probably change their minds, and Luffy didn't say anything. "Now that you're here, why don't you come with us to see your captain? Then take them with you, so that they can see the real pirates. Maybe after seeing them this time, they will change their minds?" "Of course we have to go. We are members of the Usopp Pirates. How can we escape when the captain is in danger?" The three little boys seemed to be aroused at once, and they all clenched the wooden short swords in their hands. Poof! Nami on the side couldn't help laughing when she saw the serious appearance of the three little guys. "Hey, what are you laughing at, woman? Are you looking down on us?" The three of them, who were still menacing, were ruined by Nami's laughter, and their original expressions of generosity to death became annoyed and angry. "You little bastards, don't be pirates all day long. The real pirates are not your laughing dead people's plays. Those people will not hesitate to kill or enslave you. They don't care if you are a child or an adult." Nami is quite unhappy with these children yelling about being pirates all day long, and her own experience makes her have no good impression of pirates at all. If it weren't for Luffy's appearance at the beginning, Nami might still be oppressed by the fishman pirates. Wow. Ant Tiger is going to eat people. The three little ones were startled by Nami, who was suddenly angry, and they all screamed uncontrollably. Bang! 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 Who do you say is Ant Tiger? The fist landed on the heads of the three children mercilessly, and Nami suddenly became irritable to be called Ant Tiger. Wow, was beaten by Nami alone, and the three children didn't dare to resist, so they had to cover their heads and cry out in pain. Alright, don't make a fuss, let's go. Seeing that Nami and the three little ones had no intention of stopping at all, Luffy had to stop him. Boring. Zoro pouted as he spoke, but Nami met him head on. Bang. Do you have any grievances against me? Do you want to fight, woman? Seeing the war develop to the other side, Luffy simply ignored it and walked towards the location of Usopp, who he had seen and heard domineeringly, where in addition to the familiar figure of Usopp, there were two other figures. You're just the son of a scumbag, no matter what you say or do, I'm not surprised, but please don't approach my eldest lady. In the courtyard of the big house, Sven, who was wearing glasses, held his glasses under his palm, and looked at Usopp in front of him, who was trying to explain something to the blonde girl standing in front of the window, and said coldly. You. Huh? It's really strange, the dignified captain of the Black Cat Pirates, known as Captain Chloe of the 100 Schemes, has now become a butler, and he also said that the pirates are indiscriminate, so what is the purpose of your own indiscriminate tripod to come here as a butler? As soon as they followed their perception to this rather luxurious house, Luffy and the others heard that the butler, now called Krabaddle, was counting Usopp. The sudden sound startled the three people who were originally present, and Usopp turned his head to look at Luffy and the others in disbelief. Hey, why did you bring the onion head to them? Didn't you say that this guy is a pirate? It's too dangerous to bring them over. This gentleman, please don't slander Krabaddle, he's our housekeeper, not the captain of some Black Cat Pirates. The weak lady leaning in front of the window, with short blonde hair and a little pale face, should be because she has been staying in the house all year round, and she hurriedly waved her hand at Luffy to deny the sudden appearance of Luffy. After all, she is a housekeeper who has taken care of herself for many years, and Kia doesn't believe Luffy and the others' words, but the eldest lady, who is weak by nature, doesn't get angry because of this, but just explains to Luffy and the others in a soft voice. As the person concerned, Chloe's head was slightly lowered at the moment, his glasses eyes flashed with a cold light, and the repeated appearance of spoilers made this resourceful pirate captain a little impatient. I don't know who you are, but you shouldn't be from this village. Could it be the helper that Usopp found? Why, did that liar promise you any benefits? Don't be deceived by him, he is a famous talker in the village. Although the identity of the pirate was revealed by Usopp and Luffy one after another, Chloe did not take action directly because of this, but calmly splashed dirty water on Usopp. In Locke's opinion, even if his identity is exposed, as long as the eldest lady still believes in him, then he has the confidence to solve Luffy and these outsiders without knowing it or noticing, so that the plan can still continue. As for Usopp, Chloe is not worried that someone will believe his words. After all, he has not been wasting time here in vain in the past few years. Hey, Krabaddle, how can you say that about Usopp? Hurry up and apologize to him. For Usopp, although Kia has always known that the other party is talking big, but Kia doesn't hate it, it can be said that it is because of the other party's big words that she is not tired of this bitter big house. It's useless to quibble. The Black Cat Pirates have been wiped out by me on my way here. Oh, and there is a hypnotist named Zangao who is guarding the ship on the coast. Without the cover of the Black Cat Pirates, how can you justifiably kill Kaya and inherit her family's inheritance? After hearing Luffy's words, Chloe had the urge to take out the other party for a moment, but he still held back, but the hands that fell clenched and loosened in an instant, but he didn't hide Luffy's perception. Don't talk nonsense here, if you don't leave, I'll call the security guards to expel you. Chloe turned his back to Kaya, who was staring at Luffy and the others with cold eyes in front of Kia's invisible. I really don't cry when I don't see the coffin. Luffy shook his head, and he didn't have the idea of angering the other party. After all, it is the captain of a pirate group, or a pirate who is famous for his resourcefulness, and it is just a waste of time to continue to entangle. With a slight force under his feet, Luffy's figure had already disappeared in place, and when Luffy reappeared in everyone's field of vision, Luffy had already appeared behind Locke, and at the same time, his right hand was raised high in a fist. Don't, please stop. although he didn't see how Luffy appeared behind Krabbatar. The fist raised high after that appearance made Kaya's horror. His hands clenched the window edge, tears flashed in his eyes, and he couldn't help but shout loudly. And at the moment when Luffy disappeared, the originally calm Chloe had his pupils shrinking sharply, and the moment Luffy appeared behind him, Chloe had a feeling like a man on his back, and experience told him that he couldn't stop it this time, and if he didn't dodge, he might be killed directly. In the flash of his mind, Locke's instinctive movements of his body had already appeared not far away between his steps. At this time, Luffy, who was originally raising his fist, did not smash his fist, but just loosened his clenched right hand lightly. "Miss Kia, your housekeeper is really amazing. You can have such good skills. I think your safety must be very guaranteed, right?" Luffy glanced back at the eldest lady who was still in tears, and then looked at Chloe who appeared not far away with a playful face. "Graham. Clabaddle." Arya covered her mouth with her hands and looked at her butler with some incredulity. The weak appearance with the light in her eyes looked so delicate and moving. "Cut." Chloe, who was forced out of Luffy's true strength, snorted. "Since it was discovered, there is no way, although it is very different from what I expected, but as long as I kill you, the property can still be in my hands, but I will continue to be wanted by the Navy. With this money, it is worth it." "How come?" Seeing that the butler who was originally close actually admitted the fact that he was a pirate, Kia couldn't accept it for a while. "What are you talking about? Aren't you a pirate yourself?" Seeing Chloe admit that he was a pirate, Usopp finally couldn't help but yell at Chloe. "HMPH, what are you talking about, pirates and not pirates? In that case, let's show you what a real pirate is like." Chloe, who was already wearing a weapon, snorted coldly, and then his head and hands naturally drooped. "Spoon." As soon as the words fell, the figure had disappeared from everyone's field of vision. "Hey, where did that guy go?" Nami and the others, who had been at the gate all the time, had not yet recovered from Luffy's move just now, and were once again surprised by the speed shown by Chloe. "Be careful." At the moment when Chloe disappeared, Zoro immediately drew his sword and stopped in front of Nami and the three children. There was a constant sound of sharp objects cutting through the air, accompanied by scratches on trees and walls. Just as Usopp looked around to find something, Luffy's figure disappeared in place again. Luffy's figure appeared behind Usopp, and at the same time, his right fist slammed into the direction of the ground the moment Luffy appeared. Bang! As Luffy's right fist fell, Chloe's figure was smashed to the ground at the same time, and the ground cracked in all directions in an instant. "If you want to kill us like this, you can't think too much of yourself." In the dust, Luffy looked at Chloe, who rolled his eyes and fainted on the ground with blood in his mouth, and said coldly, "How? What's wrong?" For Luffy and Chloe, who suddenly appeared behind him, Usopp looked very flustered. After all, looking at the current situation, if it wasn't for Luffy, he might have been killed by Chloe. "Good. It's amazing." The three little guys on the side only knew that Chloe suddenly disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was knocked to the ground by Luffy. Even Koya, who had been holding on to the window, couldn't help but look at Luffy in surprise with her beautiful eyes, but when she swept to Chloe who was lying on the ground, a trace of sadness flashed in Koya's eyes. It is not a happy thing for anyone to be betrayed, not to mention that the other party still fights with the purpose of killing himself from the beginning. It is estimated that only Nami and Zoro present are not surprised. After all, although the two of them do not know Luffy's specific strength, they can scare away Bucky the clown, and Chloe, who has a bounty similar to Bucky, is naturally not a problem. However, in addition to being calm, Zoro also has some urgency. Even Chloe has that speed, and Luffy can easily catch up with the other party. So how strong is the four emperors in Luffy's mouth, and how strong should Hawkeye be who can compete with the red-haired Hawkeye, one of the four emperors? Then Miss Chloe has already solved it, and you can only call someone to sort it out by yourself here. Luffy looked at Kya, who looked at Cry like a sick beauty. The other party's eyes were slightly red, and it was obvious that Chloe's matter was still a big blow to this eldest lady. "Yes, don't worry, this gentleman, Chloe is here for. After all, for the sake of my family's property. Mr. is already very grateful for helping us defeat him, and we will naturally clean up the matter here. My name is Mancha D. Luffy. Just call me Luffy." Mr. Luffy might as well say it directly. Regarding Luffy's request, Kia has no reason to refuse, although she doesn't know what the other party needs, but she thinks that the other party is not a person who will make excessive demands. "It's not a big deal. I need to buy a boat. Miss Kia has a way?" Luffy looked at the familiar cute sheep-headed bow with a smile on his face. This is the first ship he has in the true sense since he came to this world. It's nice. It must be very comfortable to sleep on it. Even Sauron looked satisfied when he saw the ship. It's good that a few people like it. Thank you really for your help. Otherwise, if something happens to the eldest lady, I really don't know how to explain to the dead old lady. The butler named Mary, standing behind Kia at this time, bowed slightly to Luffy and the others to thank Chloe for defeating Chloe. Koya, who came out of the room, seemed to be a lot better, no longer standing in front of the window before, as if she would fall down when the wind blew. At this time Kia was looking at Luffy with a gentle smile. Mr. Luffy is satisfied. The ship has prepared the materials needed for sailing, for Mr. Luffy's life-saving grace. Koya can only do so much. If Mr. Luffy needs anything, please bring it up. I will let Mary prepare as much as possible. For Kia, it was a little embarrassing for Kai to send ships and supplies, but Luffy was a little embarrassed, although it turned out that he did save her, but after all, it was just a trivial matter for himself, and Chloe didn't pose a threat to Luffy. It's already okay. Thank you very much, Miss Kaguya, for the ship and supplies. By the way, does this ship have a name? No longer bothering about these things, looking at the sailboat about 13 meters in front of him, although he already knew its name, Luffy still asked. Forward Mary, this is its name. If a few of you are not satisfied with the name, you can take it again. As for the operation of the ship, Mary, the housekeeper on the side, replied, and at the same time wanted to introduce Luffy to Luffy how to operate the Mary. It's good to call it the Forward Mary, and as for the operation method, you can tell our navigators. Luffy directly interrupted Mary's words, and pointed to Nami, who was still looking at the Mary. Nami, who heard Luffy's words, turned around and gave Luffy a blank look, and patiently listened to Mary's explanation. So, Usopp, how are you thinking about it? Do you want to go to sea with us? Seeing that Nami already knew almost everything about how to operate the Mary, Luffy turned his head to look at the long-nosed boy who had been staying next to him and didn't speak. Of course, I, Uncle Usopp, am a man who wants to be a brave warrior at sea. Speaking of this, Usopp, who was still excited, suddenly leaned his head and whispered to Luffy, "But Luffy, can we discuss something?" "What do you say?" Luffy glanced at Usopp with a smirk, as if he already knew what Usopp was trying to say. Before Usopp could say anything, he was directly blocked by Luffy, and he could only keep his mouth shut helplessly. "So, then, we're ready to go. Miss Koya, Steward Mary, let's see you again when we have a chance." Now that Usopp had agreed, Luffy decided to get on the ship and set off, staying in Sarab village for a day and a night, and it was time to move on to the next stop. Hawkeye Jorakel Mahawk, hope to see you before you enter the great voyage. Well, then, Mr. Luffy, Mr. Zoro, Miss Nami, Usopp, goodbye. I wish you all the best. I hope we can meet again. Kaya clasped her hands on her chest, watched Luffy and the others finally board the Mary, and blessed Luffy and the others. Luffy waved his hand at Koya, and then faded away from Koya's sight. Now, Melly, do you think I'll ever see Mr. Luffy and them again? Looking at the Melly, which was already far away, and the figure on the Mary, Kia muttered to the butler beside her. "Miss, who are you?" Mary was a little unsure. Listening to the tone of the eldest lady, it seemed as if she was looking forward to the early return of her sweetheart. However, the object of this expectation does not seem to be Usopp, who tells her jokes all year round, but Mr. Luffy, who is only a one-sided relationship. Melly shook her head, thinking that she was thinking too much. Maybe the eldest lady was just out of gratitude to the benefactor who saved her life. "It's nothing, Mary. Let's go back. I'll have to pick up my spirits and learn to be a doctor in the future." Without further explanation, Kia took one last look at the advancing Mary, which was about to disappear from view, with a strange light in her eyes. "Yes, miss, I will collect and sort out the relevant books and materials for you." "Ah, it's so comfortable. It's still a comfortable boat like this to sit on. Although the ship of the Black Cat Pirates was big before, it wasn't your own thing after all, and it always felt quite awkward to sit up." Sitting on the sheep's head on the bow of the Mary, Luffy experienced the feeling of the anime, looking at the endless sea in the distance, facing the sea breeze with a salty smell. This feeling is really addictive. "Hey, I said Luffy, aren't we a pirate group? Why aren't there any pirate flags yet?" Usopp, who had just joined Luffy's gang, was still quite excited about becoming a pirate, and the irrepressible excitement didn't stop from the moment he got on the Mary. Look here, touch there, and then found out that Luffy and the three didn't seem to have brought the pirate flag before. Didn't I tell you? We're not pirates yet," Luffy replied to Usopp's mindless excitement. It seems to have been said. Hearing Luffy's answer, Usopp touched his head, but his original excitement did not diminish at all. Then how about we draw a pirate flag now? Luffy expressed helplessness about Usopp's persistence, but he couldn't go back on what he promised Garp. So let's compromise. Thinking of this, Luffy jumped back to the deck from the bow of the ship. Then draw a straw hat on the top of the sail first. Don't draw a skeleton for the time being. Well, I thought it was going to be like this. As Luffy spoke, Usopp had already finished drawing his long-nosed pirate flag. Zoro and Nami, who were resting on the side, were also interested, and after seeing the pirate banner drawn by Usopp, although they directly denied the other party's results, the two were still surprised by Usopp's talent in drawing. Don't draw the skull flag yet, just draw a straw hat on the sail first, and then draw the skeleton when we are wanted. After all, I promised someone else.